change the first round, right?
Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson. We're live on a Monday morning. All sorts of fun stuff going on today, Sam. It is the start of real free agency, fake free agency. It's free agency. It's starting today, but we're kicking it off with our usual mock draft Monday, Sam.
The legal tampering period opens today. Nothing that happened already is relevant. It's all illegal. Doesn't count. Today's when it's serious.
And news was already exploding last night, just to remind people, if players have been released, they can get signed. That's why you have Devontae Adams signing with the Rams. You have a DK Metcalf trade. Plenty of news already. We're covering all of it right here on the YouTube channel for Check the Mic. So if you're not subscribed, make sure that you do that. Hit that subscribe button. Stick with us this entire week because we could go live at any time. Could be 2 a.m. Never know. We're going to go live when the big news breaks, especially starting at noon here when all the news breaks during legal tampering. I hope it doesn't disappoint.
I'm curious. The chance of asking for an update as to whether there was fireworks or gunfire outside of your door last night. Did you discover it? Research?
It was fireworks. My family confirmed downstairs. Oh, it was fireworks. We saw them, Dad. But I think they were like next door neighbors. I mean, this was close, right? This was like a couple houses, like backyards adjacent here, and adjacent backyards were firing off fireworks. And you're right. I'm on the third floor, so like the explosions right in my ear. It was, and I rewatched the video to see how ridiculous I looked. You could hear them. You can hear the background. Did you hear them? You got to rewatch.
I've got this turned down pretty low.
Yeah, you could hear it. I mean, if you jack up the volume, you could hear the explosions in the back, the fireworks in the back.
Right. But it's like I pointed out, I'm down here in the basement. Like I'm buried under 8 foot of dirt over here in my house, whereas you're way up in the sky in the attic. Like you're at firework level.
Yeah, so you never know. You never know. I mean, hopefully midday here, we're not going to have fireworks. And but at night, when we record at night, you never know when something's going to happen. So that was fun last night during the DK Metcalf video. I do suggest you check out the DK trade reaction and also my reaction to fireworks going off adjacent to my backyard. Mock draft Monday. We do this different ways every single week. We've reacted to mock drafts. At some point, you'll have a full one. I'll have a full one. We'll do the fan mock draft as we get closer to the draft. But last week, we switched. We went back and forth, which I like. I kind of like you pick, I pick, and we alternate. But this week, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to switch. And it changes the entire mock draft. We're picking for different teams. So last week, you went first and took all the odd picking teams. I'll take all the odd picking teams this week, and we'll have some fun with it.
Yeah, and what we're really waiting for is for Mel Kiper to drop an updated mock, which unfortunately probably isn't going to happen until after free agency. But we want to take down Mel. We want to take down Mel's mock. Analyze, whatever.
Analyze. We don't want to take it down. But I like when Mel and DJ have mocks. And we see where the plagiarism is. Call them out for copycatting. All right, man. Are you ready to go?
Yeah. I got as the usual caveat, I have to operate the mock draft sim. So if I'm looking somewhere other than vaguely at the camera, that's what's happening.
I would like to apologize. I've got my monitor off to the side too. All my research is to my right. And so I'll be looking to my research. I'll be trying to keep track and getting my board set and everything. So that's why we're not always looking directly at the camera. So you did a good job working the simulator last week, PFF mock draft simulator. And you ready to go? Let's do it.
Yeah. We listened to the feedback. A lot of people complaining it was too small last time. So it's zoomed in now, right? This is about as zoomed in as it can get before we start losing things off the screen. So hopefully that will be easier for the people watching along on YouTube to view.
All right, man. So I'm going to be up first here with the Tennessee Titans. I do think the Titans are going to be a quiet team here during free agency. I believe that's where they're going as a franchise, getting younger, building through the draft. We've debated, is it Cam Ward? Do you take a Travis Hunter or an Abdul Carter? Your blue chips at the top of the draft. I'm going to go with the quarterback. I think you did this last week with Cam Ward as well. I'm just going to get the quarterback out of the way. I'm going to take Cam Ward at number 1 overall if I'm the Titans. I would love to talk trade, maybe trade down. I still think that could be a better move for them, is kind of not fully committing, but we're not doing trades right now. So with that limitation, give me Cam Ward here for the Titans.
This is also the PFF mock draft sim for anyone that hasn't seen it. This is what we're using. This has also had an updated big board at some point, so that you'll find the order is different in terms of the players available, et cetera, from the last time we did this. And actually, it's the first time I've seen the new board, so it'll be an experience finding players.
Finding players, and then again, I like to reference the big board, the consensus board that we broke down last week. We went through all the positional rankings, where players are right now, just to get a better view of the market. The board on the screen there is the PFF draft board right now, but the consensus board gives you a wider breadth of opinions that all add up and just give you an idea of where players are expected to go. So I'll take Cam Ward at the top for the Titans. We've talked about that quite a bit. Let's get to number 2. You're on the clock here with the Cleveland Browns.
So this is interesting because, all the buzz right now is that Shedeur Sanders seems to be sort of slipping in this draft certainly relative to Cam Ward, that the gap between those two seems to be more significant than maybe people thought it was beforehand. All those kinds of things. I still, though, believe that this opportunity the Browns have is huge, right? To get a quarterback on this, like this sort of get out of jail free card, essentially. Like the only way out of this disastrous Deshaun Watson situation is to find a quarterback. And if you have one at the top of the draft, that's what you got to do. So I kind of feel like they have to grab a quarterback at 2, even if they don't love Shedeur Sanders. Like, even if they think we'd be happier taking this guy at 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, I feel like they kind of have to grab him. Now, again, the buzz coming out of the combine was there's a big gap between the two. We said last week, this time a week ago, literally, this was not yet reflected in the consensus big board. Like, we weren't seeing this big slide by Shedeur Sanders. He wasn't dropping down the first round. He wasn't dropping down the consensus big board. So, like, we're not seeing this reflected yet, if at all, in those kinds of things. The only way you're seeing it reflected is Trevor's big board, where he ranks 47th. But I'm taking Shedeur Sanders. I think the Browns have to, basically.
So you're still a Shedeur fan. You're taking him at 2 for the Cleveland Browns. I would, whatever. He's got it. Any concern? Let me ask you this, because I've brought up, I like every quarterback in better passing conditions. Any concerns with the arm? Cleveland, AFC North, playing in the wind and the cold. Any concerns?
No, I mean, I've said before, like, not relative to other quarterbacks, right? Like, yeah, there are games where playing in Cleveland in the cold and the rain and the bad weather will be problematic to quarterbacks throwing the football. But that was true with Baker Mayfield, who has a strong arm relative to NFL competition, not just like, relative to people like you and me. Well, maybe not you, relative to people like me, right? Like, Baker Mayfield has an NFL caliber strong arm. He's not Josh Allen, but he's closer to Josh Allen than he is like marginal NFL arm talent. And Baker had games where it's like, dude, the weather conditions, throw it out. It's meaningless. You can't get anything out of this. So, will there be games like that for Shedeur? Yes. But will those games also apply to Cam Ward? Yeah. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I don't think his arm is so marginal that there are weather games in Cleveland that will affect him, but not other quarterbacks that they could acquire. Like, unless there's a Josh Allen out here, and there isn't, it's going to be the same for everybody. So I don't think that that's a Shedeur specific concern.
All right. I love it. So I don't think this is the way it went last week. I don't think I took.
It isn't. No.
Yeah. So we're already mixing it up from last week. So we got QBs 1 and 2. I'll tell you what I'm not going to do for the Giants here at 3. I'm not going to go QBs 1, 2, 3. I'm not ready to do that yet. So you've made the point, if you're not going to take a quarterback for the Giants, you have to explain what the alternative is. I did see, I think it was Connor Hughes in Giants media painting a picture that he was calling kind of like a doomsday scenario for the Giants. I forget what it was specifically, but essentially Aaron Rodgers, who they're in talks with, maybe goes to Pittsburgh, and Sam Darnold goes to Seattle, and basically all the free agent quarterbacks go somewhere else. And then Titans and Browns go quarterbacks 1 and 2, and then it's like, okay, what do the Giants do here?
That sounds like something right out of my playbook of like rooting for the funniest thing possible to happen. Like every quarterback available just evaporates, and the Giants have to start Aiden O'Connell next year.
Well, it's ironic that you brought up Aiden O'Connell because it's essentially what's happened to the Raiders the last couple of years, right? Supposedly they wanted to trade up for C.J. Stroud in the year where it was Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson going in the top 4. So the Raiders were picking at 7 or whatever it was, and they actually were picking at 7 that year. And so they didn't get anybody that year. Last year, they're picking at 13, and all the QBs go, 6 in the top 12. So that is literally what happened to the Raiders. And here they are. Now they just traded a 3 for Geno. Like, you can come out of this and find a starter at some point, but it was 2 uncomfortable seasons for the Raiders where there were some quarterback questions of, Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell getting most of the starts.
So one thing we didn't do last week, and we haven't done so far, and where it's relevant, is we haven't traded in this first round. I noticed as of relatively recently, I haven't checked it again this morning, but the Giants and the Titans owned the same odds to pick number 1 overall, which is particularly remarkable because Tennessee owns the number 1 overall pick. So for the Giants to have the same odds to pick number 1 suggests that certainly an odds maker in Vegas suggests it is extremely likely that the Giants are going to trade to that number 1 overall pick. So
do you want to start over and I'll trade up with myself?
Well, I was just asking, like, is that a move you think will happen if we were doing trades, which given that we haven't after 2 picks, we probably shouldn't.
No, we're not gonna restart. We're only 11 minutes in that we could. No, I don't want to. I think it's likely. Not likely, but I think it's very, very possible that the Giants do want to trade up for the Titans. Again, just reading where they are in their life cycle, where Tennessee really only has 2 premium picks in this draft and would certainly love to accumulate more given the status of their roster. And they're more of a starting a rebuild type of team and trying to get away from building through free agency and trades the way they did the last couple of years. In the Giants, it's year 4 for Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. And so I feel like they can't let that scenario play out that we talked about. And even the scenario of all the free agent quarterbacks sign elsewhere and they end up missing out on the quarterback because they go 1 and 2. They can't live that life this year, because then you're talking about, second rounder Jackson Dart or Will Howard or Dylan Gabriel. And again, we don't know anything about the quarterbacks, right? We don't know. Maybe those guys have better careers, but the Giants certainly don't want to take those chances, I don't think. So yeah, I could see them making a move. And honestly, we should have redone it. I said the Giants come up to number 1 to get Cam Ward, and I would be real interested in the Titans, right? Having a little bit more patience, first-year GM, whole new infrastructure there, maybe grabbing the top Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter to build around, and then, taking those extra picks, taking a quarterback at some point, but essentially punting on this year when it comes to the first-round quarterback.
I mean, if it basically does come down to a referendum on Cam Ward for Tennessee, like if the Titans don't think that Cam Ward is the guy, they will trade down, right? Because why wouldn't you? Like at that point, okay, you're essentially gambling that Cleveland will or won't take. If you like, the only reason you wouldn't trade down is if you have either Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, or somebody else as like the clear number 1 blue chip player that's not a quarterback in this draft, and you specifically want that guy, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, you would trade down 2 spots, guarantee that you're going to get one of the blue chip players because you don't really think that Cam Ward is that guy, a quarterback. You let the Giants take him. One of the 2 picks will be Cam Ward. There's a reasonable chance that the second one will be a quarterback as well, if Cleveland thinks that this is their only way out of this Deshaun Watson contract nightmare. And so you've got a reasonable chance that you'll be able to pick whoever it is you want anyway at 3. And the absolute worst case is, they take one of the non-quarterback guys at 2, and you have your choice of everybody else: Travis Hunter, Carter, McMillan, whoever else, Mason Graham, like Will Campbell, whoever you think is going to be there. Like, I think that decision to trade or not to trade for Tennessee literally just comes down to, do we think Cam Ward is the guy or not?
Yeah. Do we think Cam Ward is enough of the guy? And And again, we talk a lot about the indecision that you should have, or the uncertainty that you should have when evaluating quarterbacks. And if you want to bake that in and come at it with some humility and say, even if we love Cam Ward, we could be wrong. And weighing that decision of he misses, he's a miss, and now I get to have other blue chip player, like you said, and whatever other draft picks, maybe next year's first rounder, whatever it might be. And that's the thing too. Like, if you could steal the Giants' first rounder for next year, are the Giants good enough in the NFC East? Where are they going to be picking next year?
Right.
If and that goes into the Cam Ward evaluation too. Like, if you think Cam Ward's just okay, and you say, go ahead, Giants, go run with him as your starting quarterback next year with that roster that is fourth best in the NFC East, you might be picking in the top 5 again next year. Now, if Cam Ward is Jaden Daniels good, then okay, you missed on a Jaden Daniels level player, and you're picking in the 20s next year. So that's a lot of what's going through what the Titans are thinking here at 1.
Yeah, so, it's like, look at the Patriots, right? Like, with Drake May, who ended up being really good, looked very good as a rookie. They end up picking 4th overall. Had a shot at the number 1 overall pick for a while. Like, they were expected to have the number 1 overall pick heading into the season. Like, you can get a theoretically franchise quarterback, but still be expected to be terrible. So you're right. Like, if next year's first is in play for this, absolutely, you should be looking at this and saying, like, how good is this team likely to be next year?
Do we have a rhyme for Arch Manning? What do you tank for?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an
suck for luck and tank for Tua, which didn't end up working. But Tua was he was the second QB off the board.
Do we even know if Arch is good yet?
He looks pretty good. I don't know if he's slam dunk number 1 overall. You've got guys like Drew Aller. This happens every year. Hey, next year's class is better. I don't know if that's actually true right now, but we'll see. All right, man. So we're going to stick with what we have right now, right? I have to pick as the Giants.
So where are you going with the Giants?
I'm going to go Travis Hunter. I've come around to Travis Hunter as the guy. We'll figure out quarterback later. We'll assume that there's some free agency stuff in here. The general caveat applies here, Sam. We know that free agency and what happens this week will alter draft plans. So our mock draft Monday next week will look different, whether we are reviewing someone else's or going through our own. We know free agency will change things. But I've come around to the fact that I want the two-way player in Travis Hunter as my top non-QB on the board. We've discussed several times already the value of him holding 2 depth chart positions, being a starting corner that could play receiver, being a starting receiver that could play corner. However you want to mix and match that, I think Travis Hunter's two-way value is outstanding. And as you've also pointed out, even his one-way value, if he was just a full-time receiver, might still be worth it. If he was just a full-time corner who I think has great ball skills, can turn the ball over, be a guy that has that 6 to 8 interception season, if he's a full-time corner, I think he could do it all. And so I've come around to if I'm not taking a quarterback in this draft, I want Travis Hunter on my team.
All right. So just for the context that we require in these things, I need a nutshell explanation. What has happened to quarterback for the Giants to be okay with that? And what are you doing with Travis Hunter is he a corner, wide receiver, a mix of both? Like, how are you deploying him?
I'm going to stick with my plan of him as a full-time corner, which I do think is a need for the Giants. Full-time corner who dabbles at receiver. So now you have Malik Neighbors as a 1, Travis Hunter as a 2.5, 3 at receiver. He's my starting corner. At quarterback, we have made a play for Aaron Rodgers. So Rodgers could come in as the veteran quarterback, but I'm also drafting one of those second-tier guys. It's somewhere in the second round, third round, day 2, basically. Right. Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel. If Jackson Dart's available, I'm taking one of those other guys. So that's how I'm hedging at the quarterback position. Aaron Rodgers, who's certainly going to mentor my rookie beautifully, right? We know that's going to work out great. So that's what's happened at the quarterback position for the Giants.
All right. Puts the Patriots on the clock. This is a tough spot, I think, because obviously, like, I think everyone, obviously their biggest needs are offensive line and wide receiver, right? Like anything to support Drake May. The offensive line, like for a long time, the Patriots and Will Campbell was like the most popular draft pick connection. Let me see if it still is on where they're likely to go. Yeah, it's by far like the most common connection of player plus team for the Patriots. But like with those measurements of the combine, the short arms, the historically small wingspan, I don't know if anyone's giving Will Campbell a shot to play tackle, left tackle at number 4 overall. Though somebody did tweet at me, I think Dante Scarnecchia said that he would play him there, which obviously Dante Scarnecchia, one of the greatest offensive line coaches of all time, and one that was at New England for, a long period all the way through their dynasty effectively, or the majority of the way there in a couple of stints. So that at least is an interesting data point. Like the NFL, I think, is very unlikely to give him that shot given those measurements. However, one of the best offensive line coaches ever said he would give him that shot. It's at least a notable point. But I now think Will Campbell at 4 overall is basically not on the cards anymore.
Yeah, so I think last week we talked about, was he a quote loser at the combine, and it's theoretically draft stock wise he could have been, just because the arm length is going to be a no for enough teams,
right?
So, but I'm with Dante. Like I would try him at tackle. I will stay on record. I think he's good enough at tackle. And when we talk about positional value, we talk a lot about like hitting on a first contract quarterback. Of course, is a massive cheat code. But as far as non-quarterbacks go, hitting on an edge rusher, hitting on a tackle, hitting on the high value positions is the next best cheat code. So you want to try him at tackle. If he fails, I do believe he could become a really good guard. He does have it is the wingspan in the arm length. It is a fascinating body type that hasn't had an opportunity at tackle often. But I think the NFL's missed there a lot. I'll always I'll cite some of the outliers. Luke Gedeke with the Bucs with his short arms has been a better tackle than a guard, right? And I do think it's lazy to just look at a number and say this guy's a guard without trying him, right? And look, there's potential downside with, like, you put him in camp, try him at left tackle, give him a year there, and he fails. There's downside to that, but there's also immense upside if he hits. So I would say you try him. But I get like your point. What's that?
All of a sudden. Look at this all of a sudden.
What's that? Oh, Membu's well, he's up on the Trevor moved him up on the PFF board, and he had that sick workout. And he had this Tristan Wirfs-esque workout, and he's got tackle size and arm length and everything. So I think Membu from Missouri is potentially moving up. He's on the consensus board at 9 right now. PFF has him at 11. So it's not just Trevor moving him up. A lot of people are moving him up as maybe tackle 1 over Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks. He's in play for the Patriots. I would say, though, I've come around to if Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter are there for New England because the QBs go, I would take one of those two guys.
Yeah, and I think that's likely.
Even with Harold Landry coming into the building in New England.
Even with Harold Landry there. Yeah. Harold Landry in a nutshell, this is a guy that I don't think has ever been particularly great as an edge rusher. He's been productive in terms of volume stats. Like, he's generally gotten a ton of pressure. His sack rate is pretty good, but he's always played an absolute ton. Even when he was healthy playing a ton, his PFF grades, his pass rush win rate, those types of things were never particularly good. And then since injury, he hasn't been that guy again. That's a lot of money for a guy that I don't know has shown that he can justify that recently. Even though, he is only 28 years old. Mike Vrabel obviously has direct experience with coaching him before. So from that point, it's a connection that makes sense. But I don't think that's fixing much about that New England defensive front.
Yeah, so I think Abdul Carter would be the play here.
Same. I think Carter probably is. But it is interesting that all of a sudden with Will Campbell potentially falling out of favor or falling out of contention at that spot, given the measurables, even if they were expected measurables. Membu, with the workout, with generally being on the rise this offseason, has risen as high as 11 on Trevor's board, 9 on the consensus board, and is starting to carve a pretty chunky niche here in terms of being connected with the Patriots. I do wonder if with that desperate need, remember, like left tackles that were potentially available in free agency are flying off the board already. Like they're going back to their places. Ronnie Stanley re-signing with Baltimore, Alaric Jackson with the Rams, like potential options for the Patriots are dwindling, and they still have that need. I do wonder if that's going to force what might be seen as a reach otherwise, but as a reach sort of being connected with, a guy that's on the rise anyway. So I'm tempted to go Membu here, but I think you're right. Abdul Carter is the pick.
And by the way, we always reserve the right to make this. This is a little bit of what we would do, a little bit of predictive, poetic license in how we're doing the mock draft here, Sam. However you want to do it, right? Hey, this is what I think they'll do. This is what I would do with that pick, whatever you want. I see some Jags fans begging not to take Will Campbell or Mason Graham at 5 here. Those are the two I'm probably debating for sure for the Jags. I'm also going to be interested in Ted McMillan everywhere along the way here because I still believe in him as a receiver. And the Jags are kind of cleaning house over the last few weeks with Christian Kirk is out. They have offensive line needs. They have defensive line needs. They've been paired with Mason Graham quite a bit. His arm length doesn't concern me as much as, say, Will Campbell's maybe. So I'm still a believer in Mason Graham in the top 5 for Michigan. We talked about his weight being a slightly under 300, but the dude can play. And I think he's an absolute game wrecker. So I've loved this fit for Jacksonville. The only thing I'm questioning here is if they did draft, I still think Will Campbell's a better prospect than Membu from Missouri. I'm not letting and Campbell, by the way, worked out great. He worked out great at the combine. So I still think Will Campbell's a better prospect. I think he's the best tackle prospect. And if he had to play guard, fine, especially in Jacksonville, where they need help. They need help on the interior. The tricky part here is they have a couple more years of Anton Harrison at right tackle, and you have Walker Little re-signed to play left tackle. So Campbell probably has to be a guard for them, at least initially, unless they make some other moves. That'd be my only reservation there. Membu too, he's probably stepping in at guard. Maybe he competes with Anton Harrison and steps in at right tackle right away. But I like Mason Graham here at this pick.
Yeah, I mean, so Will Campbell, I think, is a great fit for Jacksonville. The only question is, do you want to pick a guard at 5 overall? Effectively, is the debate. And to be fair, he would be replacing a guard that got taken at 5 overall in Brandon Scherf. So it's not unprecedented, but it is unusual and not the type of move that teams like to make. But it is like it would be a perfect fit. I mean, Will Campbell fitting in there makes a ton of sense. You're right. It's worth pointing out, like, it's not that his stuff at the combine was like prohibitively bad. It's just that there are teams that use those size and length things as a threshold, which is the correct way of doing it, right? Like, basically the stats say anything below this line has a very small chance of working out at this spot. So we're just going to immediately rule them out, right? And not go chasing exceptions and just play the percentages. So there are a lot of teams, I think, that would simply go, he's immediately a guard based off the arm length and the wingspan, which might be the more important of the two measurements. However, his overall workout was like the high end of the 98th percentile in terms of relative athletic score. So if you are betting on an outlier, if you are betting on an exception, like, that's the exception to bet on, right? A guy who, okay, he's got some length limitations, but he is a high 98th percentile athlete. That's what we want. Like, that's what's going to help you offset having shorter arms or a smaller wingspan than some of these other guys. So, I think it is still up for debate. It's perfectly justifiable to say he played left tackle in college in the SEC, and he's got, 98th percentile athleticism. Therefore, he can offset the short wingspan. But there's a ton of teams, I think, that will simply look at it and say he's a guard because of that wingspan.
All right, so we're going to be having the Will Campbell discussion probably for at least another pick here with the Raiders coming up. I'm going to go Mason Graham here for the Jags. I'm going to stick with that as the fit for them, adding more disruption on the interior. And, I think they're in a good spot there where they might have one of those tackle/guard options, have one of those defensive line options like a Mason Graham. I'm sticking with him at number 5. The one thing I didn't discuss there was McMillan. I'll grab a receiver later if I'm the Jags, but McMillan as a compliment to Brian Thomas Jr. for Trevor Lawrence. Real interested in that one, Sam. Real interested in McMillan's size, ability to get open, maybe he's not as explosive, but that's fine. We'll get Brian Thomas Jr., who can stretch the field the way he can. I love that as a potential 1-2 punch for the Jags, but it might feel like they have more work to do to work inside out on that roster before you get to that, cherry on the top of that 1-2 punch at receiver.
Yep. That brings up the Raiders at 6, who presumably have some other option at quarterback at this point, because they got Geno Smith. But they have so many needs on defense that's where I would want to go. But you look even at the big board, it's all offensive players. Okay, Jahdae Barron, we got a cornerback, Starks at safety. They're not necessarily the defensive. You would want. This is where I would want to go defensive line to pair with Max Crosby. But I think there's a bit of a gap between the true blue chip guys at the top of this draft, Abdul Carter, Mason Graham, and the next guys that you're comfortable taking on the defensive line. I think I might
consensus board defensive players: Will Johnson at 10, then Jalen Walker at 12, Shamar Stewart at 13, Michael Williams at 14. So you're it kind of matches where PFF is right there, where the next few players are offensive players.
Yeah, I might just go with, I mean, it's a risky way of doing it, but what I consider to be the safest pick of this group, and grab Tet McMillan, who I don't love. I don't think he's the number one wide receiver in this draft, because I think that's Travis Hunter. But I do think he's good. And even if you're picking him at number 6, and if he's only good, it's a bit of a reach. But you already have Brock Bowers. You now have Geno. You've got a quarterback that can push the ball down the field. Let's try and get him some more weaponry. I mean,
before you press the button.
He's strong. He's fast. He's great after the catch. He can make plays. I'm going to take McMillan.
Wait, before you press the button.
No, I already pressed it. Too late.
You didn't let me finish my thought. I think Ashton Genty's really in play there for the Raiders at 6.
No, that's why I didn't let you do that. No.
Ashton Genty is in play for the Raiders. Pete Carroll's the head coach. They got their quarterback. Ashton Genty is very much in play at number 6 overall. Because if you're playing the blue chip game, in my head, when I play the blue chip game, I kind of eliminate the running backs, right? Because I don't want to do that. I don't know if the NFL is going to do that. I don't know if the Raiders are going to do that. They'll put Genty in the blue chip category, and if they agree with those other players, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, Mason Graham as the other potential blue chip players in this draft, they're going to say, well, the last one left is Genty. We have a massive running back need. They're going to do some analytics on last year and how bad their running game was. We're going to do that, right? We're going to look at how bad our running game was if we're the Raiders, and they're going to say Ashton Genty is absolutely in consideration at number 6 overall.
What was the largest sort of investment Pete Carroll made in a running back during his time in Seattle? It was the Marshawn Lynch trade.
They traded a 1. Did they trade a 1 for him? Trading for Lynch and then signing him, probably.
Rashad Penny was a first rounder at the bottom of the first round.
Yeah. It wasn't massive. It wasn't like they kept drafting first round running backs.
Second round pick, Christine Michael.
They had two second rounders in back-to-back years, Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah.
At a time when running back value was probably at its lowest 3-4 years ago. Probably the lowest running back value you would find. So always higher than most. I'm not telling you that you needed to do it. I'm just saying in this mock where we're trying to consider all options, now that they have a quarterback, I believe in that building they're having the discussions about, okay, what about Ashton Genty?
Perhaps. I don't know. I don't think that they're necessarily investing this high in that. I think if they're planning on, focusing on the run, they're going to invest. They're going to do it the way that the Chargers did and focus on the trenches first.
All right, man. Jets are up at 7 here. I don't love the Jets spot here. Is it just it might just be because they're in this rebuild mode, and both free agency will handle some of this, but they have Olu Fashanu slated to start at left tackle. They have a need at right tackle. They're trying to get Morgan Moses back. Did you see the controversy around the Morgan Moses thing?
Controversy.
There was some controversy. Diana Rossini apparently tweeted out that Morgan Moses will have suitors in the AFC, and there was a Patriots logo on there. Almost like, pre-canned image where she's getting ready to drop some new news on Morgan Moses, right? We don't know. But there was a Patriots logo on there. So it was like, hey, the Jets are trying to get him back, but, he's going to have some suitors out there. And so if he's back, that potentially changes the strategy here because Membu or Will Campbell are going to be in play, I think. And theoretically, the blue chip options are fewer here. So I'm gonna pick between one of those tackles. Membu plays right tackle for Missouri. I'll assume that Morgan Moses is not back. We'll go with the fake report that he's going to be a Patriot here. Is the biggest shoe to drop during free agency, the great Morgan Moses. Once he signs, then then Sam Darnold figures out where he wants to go. Like it's the biggest shoe to drop at noon today. We know that. We all know that.
I mean, look, as soon as he signs, there's going to be a 2-hour special from Steve, focusing on his backstory, his childhood, all those things, everything that's led us to this point of Morgan Moses signing with the next Super Bowl champion. So be sure to tune in for that. I myself won't be, but
that's how bad Aaron Rodgers was last year. A Morgan Moses led team, and they were picking 7th overall. It's just unbelievable that Aaron was able to drag them down. So I'm going to go Membu here. I'm going to do a little bit of predictive. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of. They're gonna say he's a right tackle and fits the bill a little bit more than Campbell, and that's what we need. And I'm going to say that they're not going to sign Morgan Moses, so they're going to go Membu and Fashanu as their bookend tackles as they're rebuilding that roster in New York.
Look at that. By the way, you couldn't have been more wrong in terms of what the Seahawks gave up for Marshawn Lynch. They gave up 2 draft picks, a 4th-round pick, and a conditional 5th-round pick.
Okay. So that wasn't the
investment in that.
That wasn't the investment. It was the they signed him to a pretty decent deal. It wasn't like Adrian Peterson deal, right? But it was a decent deal.
Oh yeah, eventually they paid him big money, but they didn't give up much to get him.
Yeah, that's fine. But they drafted Penny in the first and a couple second rounders. They drafted a lot of running backs, even if it wasn't like they were throwing first rounders at it all the time. But all right, you're up. Panthers at 8, and all of the rumblings are multiple insiders are saying, watch the Panthers today. Watch the Panthers.
Watch them.
Want money to spend and needs at premium positions, we'll say, particularly the D line. I don't know that free agent defensive line investment affects them drafting a defensive lineman come number 8 overall here, but
right. I mean, there's nobody available in free agency that should stop you drafting an impact playmaker at the defensive line in the top 10. Like, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, are those guys stopping you drafting someone you think is like an impact playmaker? No.
All right. So what are you doing?
Well, like that most popular combination has been them with Jalen Walker the whole time, who apparently has slid down this draft board. Where is he? 30.
Wow. Trevor doesn't like Jalen Walker. We know Dane Brugler has him up at 3. I know Mike Renner has him pretty high. Jalen Walker is the next defensive player on the consensus board. He's at 12. I'm sorry, next defensive lineman, if you want to call him that, edge at 12 on the consensus board. So PFF and Trevor are a little bit lower on Jalen Walker right now.
Same sort of debate as the Raiders, I think, but obviously with Tet McMillan and Membu off the board, like it's whoever you think the best defensive player is or the most impactful defensive player. I think they need corner. I think they need defensive line. I think they could use help pretty much anywhere. I do think that Jalen Walker pick has made a ton of sense. I think it continues to make a ton of sense. His PFF grading is not spectacular, but we've talked before about just how small a sample size we are working from in terms of snaps, right? Like body of work, 600 last year as a full-time starter, this hybrid role, this dual position role, but then the previous 2 years combined is 360 70 snaps, whatever it is. So it's a work in progress, right? He's not like, or he wasn't the best defensive player in the SEC or anything, but the guy has only barely started to play. So I still think the projection forward is good for Jalen Walker. I'm happy taking him here at 8.
Most fascinating non-Travis Hunter player in the draft. I think I like him going further down. I think I like him also going to different systems that are going to tap into that unique skill set. But that's what it is, man. It's a unique skill set Jalen Walker is bringing to the table. So I think either way, the Panthers are going somewhere into the trenches. What do you want to do with the James Pierce discussion? He's at 17, still on the consensus board. We spoke vaguely about character concerns coming out of the combine. I know you read up a little bit more on that coming out of the combine. What do we want to do with James Pierce? Because I think if we did have a clean bill off the field, you would be considering him at 8.
Yeah. I mean, I think we just have to acknowledge that, look, these are details and conversations that are not necessarily that we don't have 100% access to, right? We're dealing with a lot of second and third hand information. But it does appear that James Pierce has significant character or off-field red flags, right? However you want to weigh that is up to you. But I mean, it's a different, each player is specific to themselves. But remember last year we were like, on field, his tape, everybody loves Jermaine Burton. However, we literally can't find anybody that has anything good to say about him. And look how that panned out, right? Like, there's a reason he slid to where he did in the draft. You're like, well, that's a steal where it is. And a year later, he might not be on the team very much longer, right? That's the kind of thing. Like, this stuff has power. It means something. So who knows with James Pierce? Like, the consensus board still loves him. Anyone that's just looking at his tape relative to this class, I think should say he belongs in that conversation with, this next wave of edge rushers: Jalen Walker, Shamar Stewart, Mykel Williams, Mike Green, James Pierce Jr. They should all be in the same bucket. But of that group, and he's not the only one with red flags, James Pierce Jr. seems to have by far the most red flags when it comes to off the field. So I think we just acknowledge that and move on.
I still think it's Howie. Howie's planting all the rumors. He's going to pick him at 32 for the Eagles. All right, I'm on the clock with the Saints here. I think there's a number of different ways. By the way, if you missed the news this weekend, they're essentially rolling with Derek Carr as their quarterback for 2025. There were some rumors and there was some discussion around Derek Carr maybe not being the guy for the Saints, then moving on. I think they looked around at the market and said, okay, we're not going to find better than Carr, at least for this year. So let's roll with him and build the rest of that team. And again, I think they're another team that when we play this game, Sam, we're like, tear it down, finally get out of the cap mess and reset this roster and draft in volume, get younger. And they have an opportunity to do that part, but it's not a full tear down, obviously, with Derek Carr. He is never a full tear down guy. He could keep you competitive, especially if you hit on a bunch of draft picks. So I think the Saints can go a number of different ways here. I would love to shore up that defensive line. I think they also have some offensive line questions. I think Will Campbell could potentially be in play here, just like he was in a few other picks. They had Talise Fawanga last year at tackle in the first round. Ryan Ramczyk ready to retire. Trevor Penning taken over at right tackle, still had some issues. So I think you could have Campbell maybe be the right tackle of the future, maybe play guard and then kick out a tackle. So I think that's in play. That'll be in play when I pick for the Niners at 11 if Campbell's still there, right? So we could discuss him for the next few picks potentially. I also, again, I mentioned the defensive line where Cam Jordan's getting older. Carl Granderson, really the only effective pass rusher off the edge. So I think that's why I'm going to go look into the defensive line. And now I like Mike Green from Marshall, and I like James Pierce from Tennessee, who we just discussed. I also understand Mykel Williams from Georgia, a little bit higher on the consensus board at number 14 right now. Green's at 16, Pierce is 17. Similar to PFF, right? They're all in a similar range. Green's got some off-field questions. Pierce, what we just discussed. Williams' big question for me is the potential, because played with an injury last year, played through an ankle, more explosive than he showed on tape, crazy length, under 1,000 snaps in his career. So I'm gonna go with the upside play here for the Saints and go Mykel Williams. So back-to-back Georgia defensive linemen. And make no mistake, they're both upside kind of plays here for both teams, right? They're still they're leaning on some level of potential here for both Mykel Williams or Jalen Walker if they get picked. But I'll go Mykel Williams here at pick number 9 for the Saints.
Look at that. I like it. So that puts the Chicago Bears up. The Bears already been doing work on that offensive line, which was the biggest need for them heading into the offseason. They've made multiple moves so far. They traded for Joe Thuney from the Kansas City Chiefs because of the big money contract that they were going to have to pay him. And then they traded for Jonah Jackson as well, who comes in and like has some experience of being a pretty good player, but is much more of an injury risk than Joe Thuney has been throughout his career. So theoretically, 2 big upgrades. It remains to be seen how big an upgrade one of those is because of the injury risk. But I don't know. Like I would have said previously, I think we gave him Kelvin Banks before from Texas, the other offensive tackle that people are saying might be a guard. Will Campbell being on the board here at 10 is pretty interesting for them. I don't know if they're in play now for those players because of those moves. I mean, you could definitely upgrade on Braxton Jones, but I don't think you need to. Darnell Wright, their other former first-round offensive tackle, he's looked pretty good now at right tackle. So I think that spot's fairly well set. If you're drafting Will Campbell at 10, what is he for this team? Are you trying to start him at left tackle, just putting competition for Braxton Jones? Are you moving him to right guard and having competition with Jonah Jackson? Like that would be my question for them if they went with that pick.
Right. So the Braxton Jones discussion would be he's heading into the last year of his rookie contract. He's been a very good 5th round pick.
Yeah.
If you just want to look at, say, PFF grading and production, hasn't necessarily progressed over the last few years. And I think I don't know if Bears fans are torn on Braxton Jones, if the PFF grading likes him maybe more than Bears fans. But, he's had some ups and downs. I don't think he's elite or anything like that, but that's an absolute, like a 3-year starter as a 5th round pick where he's been solid. That's outstanding. But he is heading into the last year of his deal. And if you do have money locked up in Joe Thuney and you're going to have money locked up in Darnell Wright, who they're probably going to want to pay more than Braxton Jones in a couple of years, you're future-proofing, bringing in competition. Will Campbell's your left tackle maybe next year, or Kelvin Banks. Use your left tackle starting next year, maybe this year with Braxton Jones. Plus, you've got the injury security and everything of Jonah Jackson. And that would be the explanation. But you're right, because they shored up guard, they don't have to go out of their way to make that type of pick right now.
I think generally there are a few things that fans tend to have a disproportionately negative view on than average to above average to below average offensive linemen, right? Like everyone you want great offensive linemen because then you don't see them ever. And you're like, well, that guy's great. End of story. Guys that are just decent caliber NFL starters, whether they're slightly below average, or slightly above average, all of which are valuable, right? Like, remember, this world of creep back toward average on the offensive line, anything north of problem is a positive value thing to have on the offensive line. But if you have a guy who is just average or above average, it means when they face Myles Garrett, right? When they face TJ Watt, when they face Max Crosby, they lose because those guys are elite. So above average going up against elite gets its ass handed to it. And that drives people nuts because they see those guys get wrecked in those games and they're like, this guy stinks. This guy's garbage. You need to upgrade on him. And okay, you could upgrade up on him. And if you did, that guy would do better against Myles Garrett and, the best defensive lineman in the world. But you don't need to. That's the point, is most of the time you're not facing Myles Garrett. Most of the time you're going up against players that are substantially worse than that. And so having an above average offensive tackle, and I think at this point, Braxton Jones has proven to be an above average NFL offensive tackle. Having that is fine. You've also got the factor that whatever his performance has been, he gave up 5 sacks last year, I think, had, let's say above average grades across the board. You were pass blocking for Caleb Williams. That's not an easy assignment for an offensive lineman. Like, he was not helping the situation when it comes to those offensive linemen. Will he ever? I don't know, but they're going to try and get him to doing that, right? Ben
That's
Johnson
why I don't
coming
look
in. is going
don't
to
look at
try and
sacks allowed for offensive linemen, as I always repeat. Do not look at the sack allowed stat for offensive linemen. There's better ones.
right. Ben Johnson coming in is going to try and improve the relationship that Caleb Williams has with those offensive linemen. So theoretically, Braxton Jones or whoever the offensive tackle will be is going to have an easier assignment going forward. But to already look average to above average in that situation, I think says he's a pretty good player. So again, I'm not looking to upgrade upon him unless you're looking a year in advance and saying we're not going to re-sign this guy. So let's get the succession plan.
So doesn't this free up the Bears to go defensive line here potentially in a deep defensive line draft? Or that they're the other team, much like the Raiders, because of the moves that they've made. I think Ashton Genty's in play. I know Bears fans have brought him up quite a bit because they've already made the moves on the offensive line and don't have to force an O-line pick. Is Ashton Genty part of the play here for the Bears?
And Ben Johnson coming from a regime that surprised everybody by taking Jahmyr Gibbs at number 12 overall when everyone was crying like that's crazy. Number one, he's not that good. Number two, it's a terrible position value type of move. You could have gotten a different, you could have gotten defensive lineman there. You could have gone other positions, and they were like, this dude's elite. We don't care. We're taking him at 12. So if any of that rubbed off on him, Ben Johnson is potentially lobbying for Ashton Genty at this spot as well.
And Genty's it's like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs rolled into one. He's got both of his running backs in one guy, in Ashton Genty.
Now, I am seeing a growing, and we said this again a week ago, I am seeing a growing contingent of people saying that Omarion Hampton, including Mike Hess here in the chat, is better than Ashton Genty. Much like there was a small sect of people that were saying Jahmyr Gibbs is better than Bijan Robinson at that draft time. Like, what if they shocked everybody and took a running back, but not the one you're talking about?
I don't think that'll happen.
But how? So, seriously, that's becoming a larger cohort of people than you would expect. Like, do you think there's any chance whatsoever that Hampton goes above Bijan or at least ends up in the same range?
I'm smart enough, Sam. Smart enough to know not to say that'll never happen. I know that'll never happen, right? That's the worst thing that happens in draft season. I know my team will never do this thing that you said that they're going to do. They're never going to draft this guy. They're never going to draft this position. I know not to do that. I still think it'll be Genty. But again, I would have said a couple of years ago, Bijan versus Gibbs, that they wouldn't get drafted all that closely, right? Gibbs is going to go maybe late first, and Bijan's going to go in the top 10, and they went 4 picks apart. And so, yeah, I would never say never. I still think Genty will be the first running back off the board. I would be surprised, if Omarion Hampton went at number 10 to the Bears and was the first running back off the board. I would be surprised by that.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to overthink Genty. Like, he is special.
That's why is the buzz down on him and Tet McMillan? We just haven't seen them do stuff. Happened with Marvin Harrison Jr. last year. Now, you could make the argument that rightfully so with Marvin Harrison Jr. The guy didn't, lift a finger during the offseason, didn't do anything, while Brian Thomas Jr. is raising his stock and Malik Neighbors was raising his stock. So you could make it, but Marvin Harrison Jr. still had a very good season. He was still a very good rookie. Maybe you don't want him over Brian Thomas Jr., though, after a year, or you don't want him over Malik Neighbors after 1 year, but he's still very good. And he lost a lot of luster by just having an offseason where he didn't do much. So that's what's happening with Genty and Tet McMillan right now.
Yeah, particularly when you compare him, I think, to Hampton. Like, Hampton's getting a lot of buzz because people are talking about, explosiveness and his workout and all these kinds of things. Like, I think Genty's got all that stuff. He just makes it look easier. Like, I don't think you're talking about like Genty's just like stumbled into this insane production because, whatever. But like, he's explosive and he's fast. Like, he runs away from people and does it with ease. So I don't think that the reasons people are gravitating towards Omarion Hampton, which may be fair. Like, maybe he was underrated at the time, but I don't think the reasons people are saying he's really good right now are reasons that Genty is not. Like, I don't see a world in which the positives for Hampton are negatives for Genty, and that's why you would rank him higher. I think the things that you like about Hampton are also things you should like about Genty, which should keep him ahead. Anyway, long way around. I'm taking Genty for the Bears.
All right, we made it. Ashton Genty to the Bears. You want to do a quick reset of where we are in the top 10 here, Sam?
Sure. Let's go here. Number 1, Tennessee Titans took Cam Ward, quarterback from Miami. Number 2, the Cleveland Browns took quarterback Shedeur Sanders from Colorado. Number 3, the New York Giants selected cornerback / wide receiver Travis Hunter from Colorado. Number 4, the New England Patriots took Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State. Number 5, the Jags took Mason Graham, defensive tackle from Michigan. Number 6, the Raiders selected Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. Number 7, the Jets selected Armand Membu, the offensive tackle from Missouri. Number 8, the Panthers selected edge rusher / hybrid linebacker Jalen Walker from Georgia. Number 9, the New Orleans Saints selected Michael Williams, the edge rusher, also from Georgia. And then number 10, the Chicago Bears just selected Ashton Genty, running back from Boise State.
As usual, mixed reaction in the chat for you, Sam, right? It's great pick or awful pick. There's no in between here with Ashton Genty at number 10 to the Bears. All right, Niners are up at number 11. I think this need and value are going to match pretty well here. Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks are both on the board. I think Banks has been linked to the Niners quite a bit as a guy that can play guard and maybe then kick out to tackle to replace Trent Williams eventually. So now you have your choice of guard tackle conversions, right? Start at guard, then kick out to tackle a little bit later on because Will Campbell's still on the board. So I still think I like Campbell as a better prospect than Banks. And so we've talked about him quite a bit. I'm going to go Will Campbell here, though, for the Niners. He'll start at left guard just for right now. He'll take over for Trent Williams eventually, give him a shot. We'll cross-train him, give him a chance to play tackle when the time comes. So I'll take Will Campbell here for the 49ers. He's going to step in and play right away. So the arm length people are happy. He's starting at guard, but I'll give him a shot at tackle when the time comes.
Yeah, arm length people are happy.
They're
That's
happy.
what we're really trying to do. Oh man!
Oh boy, the Cowboys. I gave them Genty last week, right? Just for the fun.
Probably. All right. What is the most glaring need for the Dallas Cowboys? Because obviously that's what they're doing come draft time.
Well, there's wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
There's starting wide receiver, we'll say. There's nose tackle.
They basically need the number 2 of everything.
Yeah, so they brought back Osa Odigizua, and I know that's going to be tough, right? Like if you were, I know you love Kenneth Grant.
I do.
You need this. You do like this run-stopping nose tackle, and think about how fans think. Like, we cannot take another Michigan defensive tackle in the first round, even though Kenneth Grant is a completely different player from Mazi Smith. So that's a potential need there. Sneaky need. Linebacker. Jahad Campbell. Perhaps.
Yeah.
That's a sneaky one for them. DeMarvion Overshown definitely showed some and something, but got hurt late last year. And then whatever you think of the offensive line, but I don't think they're picking a guard here necessarily.
Right. Let me give you the other sneaky upgrade. So, like I said, they definitely need wide receiver 2. CeeDee Lamb's great. They could use another guy. It's all the Jalen's. It's Jonathan Mingo, who they traded for, who hasn't shown anything yet. It's Ryan Flournoy, from a year ago. Like, this is not a group that inspires confidence. But and I with McMillan, with Travis Hunter gone, like, your next wide receivers available are like Luther Burden, Emeka Ibuka, Matthew Golden, the Texas products. Like, I don't know that you love any of these guys this high in the draft, but Dak Prescott needs weaponry. What if the weaponry is larger in shape and wears number 44 and is a tight end instead of a wide receiver?
I will say, for all the, how you talk about Jerry and it's like, he's not as crazy as he sounds. He doesn't make, you think he's crazy, but he doesn't make the same crazy moves. He doesn't fire people. He doesn't act the same way that maybe you would think.
Right.
You could argue the same thing about positional value for them, right? I mean, he was making the point when they drafted Mazi Smith. It was like, man, this is out of character for us. The league has changed. Defensive tackles don't go in the first round as much as they used to. this is different. We haven't done this in years, right? Since whatever the last time was that they did it. It was like 20 plus years. This would be a tough one for that. I don't know if this is where they would go. They already have Jake Ferguson, who has been pretty good. Going with another, they drafted Luke Schoonmaker in the second round a couple of years ago to go with another tight end. I don't know if they would go this route.
Yeah, but I mean, there's just because you've taken players at that spot and they've been, passable doesn't mean you can still go for like this is the reason, like the Bears, right? The Bears have running backs. The running backs are fine, but Ashton Genty is potentially a blue chip special player, and you just upgraded the situation for him. That should turbocharge what he can do. Like Dallas has tight ends. Dallas does not have a Tyler Warren type tight end. I mean, Dallas has like 600 yards worth of tight ends on the roster right now. Warren,
I get
has
it. I mean,
skills.
you can talk me into a tight end fitting into any offense, even when they already have it, right? Well, even when they already have a tight end, you can convince me. I just don't know about that at number 12. I know you're a Tyler Warren guy, though. I know you're a fan. I thought you were going to go corner and say Jahdae Barron or Will Johnson, that next corner off the board, might be in play here with Deron Bland heading into last year of his deal and Barron's ability to maybe play all over the place. I thought you were going to go that way. I was not expecting you to go tight end.
Yeah. Tyler Warren, number 11 on the consensus board. So right in this range, gotten better every year and was truly spectacular last year. I think if absent a wide receiver to help Dak Prescott, absent an offensive lineman that you want to put in there and help Dak Prescott, my entire draft strategy right now, given that I'm stuck with Dak Prescott, is how do I make him as good as I can get him? And that's adding weaponry. And right now, the best weapon is Tyler Warren. So that's what I'm doing.
Are you drafting him because he's just as fast as Jason Witten right now? Is that why they're the same speed? Cowboy legend.
I think offensive linemen are just as fast as Jason Witten right now.
Oh man, rough. All right, Tyler Warren to the Cowboys. It's a curveball. That's a curveball there. I was not expecting that, but yeah, I know you're a Warren guy. You've been trying to sneak Warren into the top 10 to 12 over the last few weeks here, quite a bit. So you got it. Dolphins up at 13 here. Kelvin Banks still on the board. I'm loving that. If I'm the Dolphins, similar, right? He could play guard if I need to. Eventually, be the left tackle replacement for Teron Armstead. Maybe even compete with Austin Jackson at right tackle. Just have some flexibility there. This might be a sprint the pick in for me with Kelvin Banks available there for the Dolphins. I don't want to diminish some of the other options. I'm a huge Jahdae Barron fan. I think Barron could step in and be the starting corner opposite Jalen Ramsey. He's got some, positional flexibility there. They lost, presumably losing Javon Holland at safety in free agency here. Barron could, maybe play safety, hybrid role. He could do a lot. I would consider Barron's, but a couple Longhorns I'm thinking about. They could also use the big-bodied nose tackle. Kenneth Grant can come off the board here for a bunch of different teams, I think, in the teens. But I think they got to go offensive line. So I'm gonna go Kelvin Banks here for the Dolphins. And the reason why you could talk through so many players, I think there's a lot of good value players here for Miami in positions of need. Just the way their roster has gone, they're a couple years removed from the strong go for it play to go get Jalen Ramsey, to go get Tyreek Hill. That's left other holes on their roster on both lines in the secondary. So they can go several different. There's a lot of value on the board for Miami at 13. But Kelvin Banks, I think, feels like the best play here.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy one at that point. If the draft fell this way, I think Miami would love that pick. Puts the Colts on the clock. I think a lot of people have had Tyler Warren going to the Colts. So that one obviously isn't there. This is kind of fascinating because for the first time in a long time, the Colts have shifted defensive schemes. And they've had this weird defense, particularly when it comes to the talent in the secondary. Like they have been drafting players specifically for that Gus Bradley type of defense. And they've got this ton of young players that are all similarly shaped and athletic and freaky. And most of them have not necessarily been spectacular players. But now you have this almost certain reset in terms of what direction they're going to be going in with that defensive scheme. But that's not necessarily an easy thing to do quickly. One thing I think that helps you do something like that quickly is bringing in an extremely versatile player who can let you do a lot of different things. So I just think there's something kind of funny about pivoting from long at the expense of almost anything else, long, fast corners to taking a guy with extremely short and stumpy arms as his only flaw and grabbing Jahdae Barron from Texas.
I love it. I like that a lot. Sorry, just tweeting out more. I can't get my tweets out there. What's going on? Is Twitter not working?
And look, I think he'll almost certainly in this scenario play cornerback for the Colts, like outside cornerback. But genuinely, I think Barron can play every single spot in the secondary at a high level. I think he can play outside. I think he can play the slot. I think he can play safety, either safety role, any safety role. I honestly think that guy is like an absolute complete prospect. And ironically, like the only system you wouldn't want him in would be playing outside corner for the system the Colts just got rid of.
Yeah. I like Barron a ton, man. I think that's a great fit for the Colts. And I know people look, but they're going to be a big story right now. There was, I don't know how valid the rumor was that they were maybe thinking about trading Anthony Richardson. I don't think that's wild. I think they're going to make a play for Sam Darnold later today. So I like that pick a lot for the Colts. They're going to be in the news a lot. We're going to talk about offensive weapons at that pick, and particularly tight end, because it seems like the one spot that they have a major need, maybe a starting guard. But I think going to the defensive side of the ball if you're the Colts also makes sense, because I haven't loved the corner position for them even when Gus Bradley was there, even though they got their prototypical players. So, all right. Number 15 overall, we get the Atlanta Falcons up on the clock. I think every time we do this, we're looking at the defensive line. How many times in the last 10 years have the Falcons drafted edge rushers, drafted the next great pass rusher? Well, they're going to do it again this year. They're going to have their choice of the next great pass rusher. So I'm debating here between James Pierce and Mike Green at edge. I know Shamar Stewart is right there. And look, I feel like I've, done my usual on Shamar Stewart. He's a workout warrior. His pass rush production isn't anywhere close to what other previous first rounders are. But I kind of get, I get Shamar Stewart. I can get why people would love him. Like, he is violent in the run game, and he has enough pass rush reps that pop, to compare him to Trayvon Walker. Again, I don't think Trayvon Walker had a ton of pass rush reps that really popped in the same way that Shamar Stewart has. Needs to finish better, needs to just win better. But I think he has the potential to be an elite run defender. But I think the other guys, Mike Green or James Pierce, have better pass rush potential, and that's what the Falcons need right now. So I'm going to go Mike Green here from Marshall as a productive edge going in the middle of the first round. As I said before, if you watched his tape and he had, Buckeye helmet on, he might be going top 5 or 10. So I think that's a good pick here for the Falcons at 15.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys have got various question marks about them. Mike Green's question primarily, like there's been some off-field concerns as well, but his primary question is just that he did it at Marshall, right? And that
right.
I saw recently, I forget where it was, like somebody is sort of saying that now teams are starting to hold that against players, right? Before it was, well, if you've had to transfer, like that itself was a red flag. Remember when Joe Flacco was coming out? Joe Flacco, the fact that he couldn't beat out Tyler Palko, whoever it was, at Pitt, that was like a huge red flag. The dude had to transfer to be a good player. This guy's never going to survive. Now it's almost the opposite. It's like if you stayed in the one place and didn't transfer to the better school, to the SEC level of competition, then that's a red flag. Like, what are you, scared to compete? So Mike Green, the fact that he did it all at Marshall and didn't go somewhere else is potentially something the teams might not love. But he did show up at the Senior Bowl. Now, he got his one rep against Josh Connolly, like buried him, and then was like, all right, I'm out. So maybe he's scared to compete. Maybe that's Mike Green's problem.
He's scared to compete. No, he competed and left. Maybe a little early.
Well, maybe he's like, I'll take it. Mike Green plays the game the way Dana White gambles in Vegas, right? Like he just stays until he's up, and then he's out. The second he's ahead, gone.
You can't lose if you leave when you're up. That's what they say. Hey, these three picks are really interesting, right? The Falcons, Cardinals, and Bengals. You might not find three teams with bigger defensive line needs than those three all in a row, especially if the Bengals end up trading Trey Hendrickson So, Sam Hubbard retiring. All three teams could use a pass rushing defensive tackle, a big-bodied nose tackle like a Kenneth Grant, or any kind of edge presence. So I think that's going to be a really interesting point in the draft that we're at right now, 15, 16, and 17, with all these D-line needy teams. And you're up next with the Cardinals at 16.
Pick number 16, the Arizona Cardinals, with defensive needs, like defensive line, sure, but defensive everything, really. Still, I think this is a perfect spot for my guy, Kenneth Grant. Now, look, it's a good spot for defensive line generally. I mean, you're the middle of the edge run at the moment, but also, like, Kenneth Grant is here on the PFF board. Where these guys rank on the consensus board? We've got Grant up first at 18, Walter Nolan 22, Derek Harmon 30. This is where this kind of group of defensive tackles are going off the board in the consensus. PFF's has got Grant at 17, Derek Harmon 22, Darius Alexander 23, Walter Nolan 25. But I mean, honestly, I think these two, right? Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan would be the two that I would be choosing between. I just think I don't know why. It goes against the way I normally approach draft prospects, but there's something about Kenneth Grant's play that I love. Like, it jumped out on tape just watching Michigan games. Kenneth Grant was a guy that flashed constantly, and for some reason I'm buying into his inconsistent, freaky athleticism relative to other players that have that as well. I think the potential is there for Kenneth Grant to be special at the next level. He reminds me a lot of another former Michigan defensive tackle, Alan Branch. And I think the league is more equipped now, or better suited, to sort of realize what that player is, instead of just saying you are a 2-down run stuffing nose tackle, like, be that and be happy. I think the league is better suited now to understand that if you turn Kenneth Grant loose and just let him go nuts, he's an impact player.
The Cardinals, by the way, brought back Baron Browning over the weekend to rush off the edge. They still have the Barbarian as a pending free agent. They have Zaven Collins. Like, they have some options off the edge, but I do believe, and then you bring in Darius Robinson last year in the first round, more of a hybrid player, as you called him, like an old school 3-4 type of player. So he's not exactly a pure edge. He's kind of an interior player, but Kenneth Grant is a body that they don't have, body type that they don't have. So I do think that is a nice fit there for the Cardinals. Something about him. Chat likes that. Something about that Kenneth Grant guy.
One of my favorite players in the draft. Like, I don't have it. I think that's how I'm going to start terming those guys, for when I don't have a particularly sound, logical reason for liking a guy as much as I do. They just become one of my favorite players.
You're allowed to do that. That's fine. Now, just the problem is, why don't when you're picking him at 16, don't say, well, he reminds me of Alan Branch. And even if the answer is, well, they didn't use Alan Branch well back in the day, rotational run stopping defensive tackle is not necessarily the guy that you want to pick at 16.
Branch was good.
He was good. But I'm just saying, it's not going to excite the fan base. It's not going to excite the Cardinals fans. Like, we got our Alan Branch. We've been dying for that guy.
Former first-round pick?
Was he? I don't think he was drafted that high, was he?
Second, 33 overall. Sorry, I'm out by a pick.
Close.
The 33rd overall pick of the 2007 draft, and then played for a decade. What more do you want?
I don't know. More pass rush production, probably.
But that's because he was 350 pounds, and they said you were a nose tackle. That wasn't his fault.
That's why. It's not his fault. No, you explained it well. All right, Cincinnati Bengals are up on the clock at 17. A lot of drama in Cincinnati because nothing's happening. That's the drama. Nothing is happening. Trey Hendrickson's asking for a trade, aka more money, as you explained to me. So he wants more money. He wants to get paid. Even if they bring Trey Hendrickson back, they're banking on former first-round pick Myles Murphy to be a productive edge rusher next to him. They need more help on the edge. They need more help at defensive tackle. To me, I'm debating between James Pierce, 17 on the consensus board. We're picking at 17. James Pierce, Shamar Stewart would be in play here, and Walter Nolan, I think, for me, is in play here. Any one of those pass rushers. Cornerback's a sneaky potential play here, but I'm going to bank on the returning from injury DJ Turner, Dax Hill. to fill that. Cam Taylor, like between those three guys to figure that out. I think it's got to be defensive line for the Bengals. I've loved the Walter Nolan fit for Cincinnati here as an interior pass rusher. So I think I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go. Do you see Ezeraku, by the way, way up on Trevor's board there? He's like a mid-first rounder now on the PFF board. Still I like him a lot. I like him probably in the back end of the first, though. I'm going to go Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. So back-to-back defensive tackles. Nolan as an interior pass rusher here for the Bengals. Helped get the most out of Chris Jenkins last year, second rounder, and just building through the trenches in Cincinnati.
All right. I like it. Yeah, I mean, I think the Bengals definitely need defensive line help regardless of what happens with Trey Hendrickson. But I do sort of feel like if they lose Trey Hendrickson, they almost have to grab an edge rusher in the first round.
Yeah, they might need to. Again, I don't know what to do with Pierce. I just don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I'll probably end up taking him later in the first round. As far as there's not a whole lot of other edges that high. Izaraku, maybe. Scourton, depending on how much you like him. They're a little bit lower on the consensus board.
Shamar Stewart.
There is Shamar Stewart, and I might pick him at some point, but I think I'd rather take him later. That's all.
Also, if the Bengals are willing to roll the dice on Jermaine Burton, you don't think they'll roll the dice on James Pierce?
Well, I think that's one of those, like when you hire a player's coach, then you go to the authoritarian coach and you go back and forth. I feel like Cincinnati's going to take a break from character questions for a while.
Cincinnati, historically, aren't they one of the most willing to roll the dice on character teams in football?
Yeah, and they've had success. They've had success with it.
Sometimes.
They've had. It's what I mean. It's just it's a gamble, right? It's like it's a high upside gamble, which is why, I mean, that was always the context around my Jermaine Burton love, right? Love him on the field. And if you get him in the third and he hits, the payoff is incredible, but he also could be out of the league in a year. And, here we are.
It's also kind of, it's volatile, right? It's like you can have it's sort of like, it's a bit like those injuries that will end a player's career. You just don't know when, right? Like, it's sort of like that. It's like you can take a guy with these issues, it will come up at some point. It's just how long are you going to get out of it before it does? Will you get a contract out of him, in which case it's cool? Do you get 2 contracts out of him, in which case it's barely registers? Or is he 6 weeks in, halfway through training camp, and you're like, God damn it, it's already a problem. The cops are already on the doorstep. This is already a mess. We screwed it up immediately. So yeah.
There's something. It also just, I get the sense that it's just taxing. I mean, with Burton in particular, it's like you just didn't know if he was going to show up to practice on Friday, right? So it's taxing on the organization, and that's something that me, GM Steve, sitting in the seat here, it's easy for me to say, hey, take the risk, but when the whole organization is can't rely on this guy, don't know if he's going to show up, and don't know when, like you said, the volatility, that's difficult. So
I mean, I did make this point though, again, for a third round pick like Jermaine Burton, it's not really worth spending the kind of resources that it would take to keep him in line, right? If you just sort of decided this guy literally needs a full-time babysitter, right? That's the kind of resource we need to dedicate just to make sure that he's going to go to bed, get up, and arrive at training or meetings. It's not worth doing for a third round pick. It might be worth doing for a first round pick. The money that you have invested in that guy is actually it changes how much it's worth you to keep that guy on the straight and narrow, right? So, if that's the kind of decision, or if that's part of the decision-making process for a guy you're drafting in the third round pick, we are not dedicating special resources. He's either going to pull himself together or he's not. Either way, so be it, right? If you're drafting a guy 17 overall who needs to contribute year one, you might be willing to dedicate full-time resources to saying, you are individually responsible for making sure he is at every damn meeting, every practice, and goes to bed. You are now his brother for all intents and purposes.
I mentioned that to you off air before, but Josh Hamilton, the Major League Baseball player who had his own drug issues, came back from it and, had a nice short career. He was supposed to be the next Mickey Mantle. But my old hitting coach was his babysitter when he was in Cincinnati in Texas. It was a full-time job. Stay with Josh. Stick with Josh Hamilton, right? So that does exist at the professional level.
And I think the better you are, or like the
Yeah.
more invested in you, the more likely it is that that's a thing, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and largely because you didn't volunteer for the job, Jermaine didn't have that. Jermaine Burton never had the full-time babysitter.
It worked. It worked for a while with Josh Hamilton. All right, man, you're up. Seattle Seahawks at 18. Now one of the more fascinating teams in the NFL with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf gone. Now 10 draft picks, I believe, including 5 in the top in the first 3 rounds. So a lot to do here in Seattle. You going QB?
Well, see, this is the thing. Like, what am I doing now as a franchise? Like, I still have the hole on the interior of the offensive line. Like, I could upgrade all 3 interior spots. Now I don't have a quarterback, and I don't have at least a number 2 wide receiver, if not, depending on where you rank or how you view the DK Metcalf versus JSN dynamic there. So I've got 1 good wide receiver. I got 2 good bookend offensive tackles. I've got talent in the backfield, and that's my offense right now.
For those who care, and you can get on Twitter right now, it's been in and out. I did drop like 3 Seahawks mock drafts last night with the trades involved, just to see, just scenario analysis, right? Do they? In each one, I kind of drafted a QB in the second round. It was like a Jalen Milroe or a Will Howard, just to see. One of them, Shedeur Sanders, was available there again because he's kind of low on the PFF board, so he's available there at 18. I don't think that's a realistic scenario, but second round quarterback, I think, is very much in play now for the Seahawks, which means, hey, in the first round, is this like shore up the offensive line? Is it to get the next receiver to replace DK? Is it just grab the next best player or whoever the best player available is? There's a few different options here.
Yeah, though I wouldn't entirely rule out the idea that Shedeur Sanders could slip, this far in the draft.
Possible.
There's enough people that really don't seem to like him that this is at least theoretically possible. I'm not taking another quarterback at this spot. Like I'm not doing whoever, like whether it's the Jackson Dart thing, whoever you think QB3 is, I'm just not. There's nobody in this draft I think is worth taking at 18 in that spot. So I'm not doing that. I don't think I want to take any of these wide receivers at that spot either. He's very different to JSN, but I think there's too much deployment redundancy between JSN and Luther Burden from Missouri, at least until like you would have to project a lot for one of those guys for it to not be, I think, a lot of redundancy still leaving a fairly glaring hole in terms of the skill set from those 2 guys. I don't want to take Ibuka there or Matthew Golden for different reasons, but I'm kind of out of the wide receiver game at this spot as well. And then we know they don't like taking on interior offensive linemen at this spot. So I think you probably just end up best player available.
The people are asking. I see the chat asking for Nick Emanwari. Again, let's not forget about him. He's 29 on the consensus board. I thought he'd be higher. I thought he'd start moving up higher after that incredible workout. PFF board still loves Malachi Starks, and the consensus board has him at 20, so they still have him higher. I think both of those guys could be in play here for Seattle.
Yeah. I think they end up going for one of the defensive linemen in this kind of scenario.
Really?
Yeah, like I'm going to pass on James Pierce because
they've kind of loaded up at on the interior the last with Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed's back, and they just drafted Byron Murphy last year, so they're loaded up there. But edge, they grabbed all those second round edge rushers the last couple of years. They're all okay. Maffei's pretty good, but they could still use more help there.
I feel like this is where I'm taking the gamble on athleticism and upside and potential, and I'm grabbing Shamar Stewart.
Wow, look at that, Shamar Stewart to the Seahawks. I was going to consider him with the Bucs here at 19. So you're helping my thought process. I was going to consider Shamar Stewart, edge rusher for the Bucs. I am really tempted by Jihad Campbell here for the Bucs at 19. You have Todd Bowles, blitzes like crazy. Levante David is back once again, but they still need a dependable starter next to him. What are you smirking at?
Just the back-to-back comments in the chat of bad pick, great pick.
Nice. That's what it's all about. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still, you know me, I'm probably of the mind that I would rather let someone else take Shamar Stewart, but I get it, right? I get it.
Yeah. But again, like I've made this point the whole way along. It's a totally different conversation at 18 overall than it was for number 1 overall with Trayvon Walker, even if you stipulate that like these are the same players, right? Like it's a very, very different discussion when it's 18, and we've already had a run on edge rushers and, defensive linemen coming off the board. And it's like, now what do we think about potential versus production, as opposed to, hey, is this production possible at number 1 overall? Like, I don't know. I just think it's not the same conversation the lower down the first round you get.
I also don't like people getting my my safe words or whatever I use. I guess I say here a lot. There's a count going. But here's the pick. Here. At 19
Okay.
here. I'm tempted by Campbell at linebacker. And we've mentioned this on 12 straight shows now. Not necessarily a pure edge rusher. I also know, I read the comment too. I know he came out of high school as an edge rusher. That's what he was doing, right? He was an edge rusher. It's not what he did in college, though. It doesn't mean he can just rush off the edge at the NFL level. I've seen him try to rush off the edge in college. I don't think he's an edge rusher, but a good blitzer. That's what Todd Bowles likes to do. So that fits his skill set. I just think he's a very good all-around linebacker. And at some point, Levante David's going to retire, right?
Sure.
Presumably within the next 4 years. So I like Campbell as a fit here for the Bucs. I like all the edge rushers that are still available as well. Pierce would be the next guy, or Ezeraku or Scourton, I think, should potentially be in play. They could go with like a Gray Zabel, maybe to step in as a starting guard. I think that's all in play here for the Bucs. But I like Campbell for the fit here. First linebacker off the board, not named Jalen Walker. So give me Jahad Campbell to the Bucs at 19.
Boom.
Before you draft a tight end for the Broncos, as is the chalk pick here, Evan Ingram is visiting. The recently released Evan Ingram, Jacksonville Jaguars, is visiting the Denver Broncos, which, by the way, if they signed him, I think would be a beautiful move to upset the mock draft community and not have to force, Colston Loveland or Tyler Warren in every single mock draft for the Broncos. I think that'd be a good move for Denver. So just throwing that out there.
I don't know that Evan Ingram necessarily prohibits you from drafting a tight end in the first round.
I mean, I don't think Denver's so great as an organization that they have to just fill the next starting spot, which is tight end. So that would, I think, perhaps help that. So
no, but I don't think they need to anyway. Like, I don't think they're necessarily being mocked to the tight end because it's like a glaring need that they absolutely need to fill and therefore have to take a player. It's just that, generally speaking, Colston Loveland has been available here and he's worth this kind of pick. Like, it's one of those ones where need and fit lines up. Need, value, and fit all lines up quite a lot in the first round, and that's just where they've been given players.
We have breaking news here on the show, per Rap Sheet and presumably others here. The Falcons are releasing Grady Jarrett. So defensive tackle Grady Jarrett started to decline a little bit. He's been in the league 10 years. So Grady Jarrett hits the market, another defensive tackle. All the older 10-year type of players like a Grady Jarrett, I always think, hey, ease up the workload on him a little bit. Just let him get after the QB. Could probably still be effective. So I think could be a key player for some teams. But for Atlanta, just opens up even more defensive line needs for them.
And they've given him a whole 90 minutes to hit the market before everybody else.
Yeah, doing him a solid. Get out there.
It's real solid. I really like the fit of Luther Burden in this offense at this spot. You've got Cortland Sutton, who's like their number one receiver, and Marvin Mims, who's becoming this sort of, hybrid weapon out of the backfield, vertical threat, gimmick type of player. Luther Burden's dynamism after the catch with the ball in his hands is like freaky good. His stop-start ability, his break or catch or tackle breaking, what I was trying to say, ability. Look at this, 30 broken tackles, first in the nation. He has like 65 in his college career over 3 seasons. That's insane. Like, that's an absurdly high number. This scares people a little bit, this drop down from 2023 to 2024. I think you can primarily put that down to just the situation. Like, I don't think he was dramatically different. I think the quarterback, the offense generally stank, and that explains that drop. But I think that's kind of scaring people away from I think, this time a year ago, we're talking about a guy on the fringes of the top 10, and now we're talking about 10 picks later. But I think at this point, Luther Burden is value.
I like that fit. That's nice. Burden to the Broncos here. They're loading
Right.
up. Like we said before, like they have a pretty good roster there.
We're going to reset the next 10 picks. Will Campbell, number 11, to the San Francisco 49ers, tackle/guard from LSU. Number 12, the Dallas Cowboys selected Tyler Warren, the tight end from Penn State. Number 13, the Miami Dolphins selected Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle from Texas. Pick number 14, the Indianapolis Colts selected Jahdae Barron, the cornerback/do-it-all defensive back from Texas. Number 15, the Atlanta Falcons grabbed Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall. 16, the Cardinals picked Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle from Michigan. 17, the Bengals selected Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss. 18, the Seahawks selected Shamar Stewart, edge rusher from Texas A&M. 19, the Bucs selected Jahad Campbell, the linebacker from Alabama. And then 20, the Denver Broncos just grabbed Luther Burden III, wide receiver from Missouri.
All right. I like that pick there for Denver. That's solid. Pittsburgh Steelers up at 21. I'm going to throw out a name here that I haven't heard for the Steelers, but Nick Eamon-Wari is a guy I'm considering right here. I don't know why I'm souring on Starks in my head. I'm letting this happen, and in part because I just haven't loved Starks as a pure safety. I feel like he's out of position a lot as a safety. Eamon-Wari, the fit here for Pittsburgh would be based a little bit around. You have Minkah Fitzpatrick still, more of a pure free safety. Have Eamon-Wari play closer to the box, can play a little dime linebacker, as we've talked about. And I always think about in the AFC North where you have to handle the Ravens with Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. I'm always thinking about how do you stop and slow down a Lamar Jackson. I think Eamon-Wari's speed, athleticism, everything that he brought to the table at the combine helps quite a bit in this division. And what you have to do, slowing down the Bengals, their passing offense, Eamon-Wari's range, his ability to make plays on the ball and coverage, I think it helps there. So I'm considering this. Eamon-Wari to the Steelers. Now, we don't know what happens at the quarterback position. I'm also not going to necessarily force QB3 here at pick 21. They might. Honestly, all those moves the last couple of days might make the Jackson Dart rumor come true, where he's the next, Kenny Pickett-ish type of pick right around pick 20 for Pittsburgh. I'm not comparing them as players, but maybe Jackson Dart is the play here for Pittsburgh. But I kind of like Eamon-Wari here for Pittsburgh and think he could legitimately be in play. They have Minkah Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Elliott. Elliott's got one more year on his deal, but I think Eamon-Wari, they could fit him in and use that athleticism right away all over the defense.
So we're doing it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Pressing the button. All right. The Los Angeles Chargers pick number 22 up on the clock. This has got to be like the Omarion Hampton. Yeah, almost. Colson Loveland's actually the most popular pick for them, but Omarion Hampton seems to be the one that I'm seeing every mock draft at the moment. That kind of feels where they would go in this situation.
They need any type of pass catcher. So you're thinking about a receiver that fits with Ladd McConkey or a tight end. I think absolutely they're at least considering all those options. I know you don't love Ibuka, and I'm okay on him, but so I don't know if he ends up in our first round mock. I think in real life, there's enough buzz around people having Matthew Golden as their new wide receiver one, Travis Hunter agnostic, that Golden's going to go pretty high. And him, I don't even think he made it into our first round mock last week, which felt wrong if we're being like somewhat predictive. So I could see him being in play here. Maybe,
but yet, so it is interesting that pretty much everybody that like watches the tape or, is a sort of draft scout or whatever, like the analysis is the same. It's like everyone seems to be like, didn't feel like a 4.29 guy, like
I've asked around. I'm going to ask around even more because I thought I didn't think I was going to be like on an island with that take, but I feel like I was going to put that out there and be, oh, you're a hater and this and that. I feel like a lot of people agreed.
Yeah. Like everyone seems to have that exact same take, which is, okay, the 4.29 was great, but it didn't feel that way. Like it didn't look like he didn't play like a dude that has 4.29 speed. So that makes me wonder if, have we developed beyond a point where simply putting a 4.29 down on a stopwatch will propel a guy up a draft board the way it used to? If we have, then Golden might not be a first round guy.
I honestly think he's like the first guy, though, where you went back and watched the tape and just didn't see it, though. I mean, I really like Rashad Perryman came out of nowhere and ran like a 4.29 or 4.3 or whatever it was. And then it's like, oh, we got to go back to the tape. This dude's like 6'3" and huge. And you watch the tape, it's okay, he's fast. Or Darius Hayward-Bay ran super fast and it was huge. And you went back and watched the tape and said, okay, we kind of knew he was this fast, right? And it shows up on film. I honestly think Golden's the first guy who ran at that speed, and you went back and watched the tape and said, I just don't see it. So that is legitimately what I don't know that we're like progressing as a society or anything like that. I just think everyone was shocked that he ran that fast and wasn't in the 4.4s.
I wonder if it shows up more. Do we need to go back to Houston tape? Go back to the Houston tape?
Maybe. I'll do that. I'll go check it out. Either way, I think he was already in the first round mix, and then at least ticked that 40 box. So I think he's going to end up going high.
I honestly think it's down to these two, though. The two most popular picks for the Chargers at this spot in the PFF mock draft, Sam, whether it's running back Amarian Hampton from North Carolina or the Jim Harbaugh Michigan connection, Colson Loveland tight end from Michigan. I think those two are the most likely picks. They should both make a significant impact in this offense of both most offenses. So I guess I'm going to lean with the Michigan connection and give Jim Harbaugh one of his own back.
All right, do it. Sorry, we're having what's my latest technology issue? My computer 2 mouse ran out of batteries.
Perfect.
So we're stuck. We're stuck over there. That's a new one for me. A new tech issue that has just dropped. So you get Colston Level in there. Green Bay.
Wow.
Up on the clock.
See that? Okay, more breaking news.
What do you got?
The Carolina Panthers and cornerback Jaycee Horn have agreed to a 4-year, $100 million extension that makes him the highest paid cornerback in NFL history.
Wow, look at Eric Eager throwing that money around. Dr. Eager making the play for Jaycee Horn. Top corner?
Jaycee Horn, who has played one full season ever?
Yeah, let's get to the let's see.
Jaycee Horn's 4-year NFL career right now is 2,263 snaps old.
Well, it's funny. He played 1,000 snaps last year.
Right, but that's the first time.
And
by the way,
his second full-time season, missed a little time in 22, 2 out of 4 so far.
But that was his first season with 1,000 snaps, and that had a coverage grade of 58 with 5 touchdowns coughed up and 1 interception and a passer rating of 91 into his coverage. And it's his worst coverage season.
That is an interesting one. Did you see Sauce Gardner was asking the people yesterday on X? And he said, explain to me why the cornerback market is so, like, the receiver market is huge.
Yeah.
The edge market is huge. Why is the corner market down?
Yeah.
And it's a fair question, right? Because he's saying it's a passing league. The receivers are getting paid. What about the guys that cover them? And I was of the minds that we just kind of like hit a lull. I honestly thought it was more cyclical than it was the NFL making a decision. I thought we just didn't have good options to pay a lot of money to. And honestly, Jaycee Horn's, he's been pretty good when he's been out there, but that might back up what I'm saying. I don't think there's been great options to pay. I think Surtain got his money. Sauce will get paid quite a bit.
Yeah.
Derek Stingley will get paid quite a bit. Those guys will surpass, I think, Jaycee Horn, but there haven't been a lot of, hey, surefire, pay this corner type of guys coming off an era where, Richard Sherman and Darrelle Revis, a decade ago, those guys were the clear top guys.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think a lot of it is the certainty. So you're naming players that are either have gotten paid or are getting paid, but they're still. I mean, we're talking about Jamar Chase chasing down a contract deal where the APY starts with a 4, right? Like he's looking for $40 million a year, the benchmark has already been set at beyond $35 million a year. That's $10 million a year more than the corresponding cornerbacks, right? 15 more if you get them over 40. Like Patrick Surtain's on $24 million a year in terms of APY. I think a lot of it is the uncertainty thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
in any given year, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, absent injury, are going to be two of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. In any given year, I mean, Jaycee Horn, like, he just had the first season of his career where he had 1,000 snaps. And that was the worst season of his career. He gave up a passer rating of like 91, had a coverage grade of 60. So even if you're like the volatility for cornerbacks, I think is just so much wider that even if you think you have a top guy, I mean, Sauce Gardner, right? 2 incredible seasons coming into the league, takes up golf, doesn't play as well. Like anything randomly, the guy that you think is like, he's the cast iron sort of best corner in the league can just have a completely average or below average season out of nowhere. Yep. And if they do, you're suddenly like wildly overpaying those guys.
Definitely a more volatile position. That's the other part of it. Absolutely. Completely agree. So yeah, that's some good news there. That's breaking news. We're having it's a long show here today. Got a lot going on. Back to the mock here. Packers at 23. Will Johnson has fallen quite a bit here. Michigan corner that's been rumored to go in the top 10. He's another one, like out of sight, out of mind, right? With injuries, not working out. That's much like maybe Genty for different reasons, but Ted McMillan, guys that just were supposed to go in the top 10 that now stock might be falling, or there's some uncertainty around them. But I think the corner value, I'm going to stick with this now since we're talking about Jaycee Horn. The corner value in the 20s to the 40s, I think, is going to be immense. If Will Johnson did fall, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, Javon Ravel, whoever it is in this range are going to be extremely valuable. So give me Will Johnson at corner. Jair Alexander going to be out in Green Bay. Massive corner need there, and I think the value matches up here. Give me Will Johnson to the Packers in this particular mock because he's available.
Yeah, I think Will Johnson is going to end up being a steal for somebody, given the way that his stock appears to be. I don't know if it's sliding or if it is, as you say, out of sight, out of mind. We're just kind of sleeping on him because he's not, running 40s and putting up freaky measurables right now. So we're kind of sleeping on how good he is. He's still the number 10 player on the consensus big board, which is, 13 picks ahead of where he's going here. So I feel like he's going to be value come draft time. 24, Minnesota Vikings on the clock. One of their 4 draft picks. What do we got? Needs need to be updated here at PFF. They got Aaron Jones back, so I don't think they need to chase a running back. Not that they would have in the first round anyway. I think they're going to be interested in the interior offensive line market, whether that's Tyler Booker, the top sort of like official interior offensive lineman, or whether it's the offensive tackles that you project inside, guys like Gray Zabel. I think that they're going to be players in this offensive line group, and Gray Zabel, I think, represents insane flexibility. I like that pick for them.
That seems like, to me, the need and value fit for Minnesota every single time. Gray Zabel in play and Derek Harmon in play. So interior pass rusher, interior pass blocker. Feel like, and they with so few picks, they probably have to have the need and value match up extremely well. And those names always come to mind for Minnesota at that point.
Yeah, and the Gray Zabel thing in particular, like that lets them do some business in free agency. Like it doesn't, lock them into one specific spot that they have to upgrade. They can go grab a player or two in free agency, whether it's center or either one of the guard spots, and Gray Zabel just sort of fits into whatever you didn't manage to get fixed in free agency. Gray Zabel, a college offensive tackle at North Dakota State, goes to the Senior Bowl. They play him at all 3 interior spots, left guard, right guard, center. Arguably, he looked the best at center, but he looked good at all 3 of them. So I think you could take Gray Zabel and not care which one of the interior players or interior positions that he's fixing. Just know that he is fixing one of them.
All right, that puts the Texans up on the clock. Also could use some interior offensive line help. I think Gray Zabel would have been a nice fit there. Texans could also use tackle help. There's a lot of what ifs on this team. They just released Shaq Mason, who just kind of aged, pretty quickly over the last year
Right.
plus. So they need guard help. They've also put Titus Howard back into guard, and last year's second rounder was Blake Fisher at right tackle. So I don't know that Blake Fisher is definitely the long-term answer there. So Josh Simmons from Ohio State, I think, is in play. The medical is going to be huge for him. Knee injury, reportedly not great. So I don't know what ends up happening with Simmons. Also, one of the few tackles that just is he's just going to stay at tackle, not really getting talked about as a guard. So I would draft him. If they draft him here, I'd just start him at right tackle. And him and Blake Fisher battle it out. You hope that Simmons wins it. Maybe you move Fisher around or he becomes the swing tackle. So I'm going to go Josh Simmons here. Ohio State, a pure tackle. Only a half year really of production at Ohio State. I think that's going to be part of the concern. Transferred from San Diego State plus the injury. So it's not a clean bill of health necessarily or a clean production profile for Simmons, but I get it. He's also, 19 on the consensus board. So decent value relative to the market here for the Texans.
Yeah, he is the top player available on the consensus board at this point. It was Josh Simmons, and then it was Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, were the next two. It is interesting. I think it's a great fit for Simmons. Number one, they can give him, they can ease him in. He doesn't necessarily need to start right away. They can go into the season saying, "Hey, Blake Fisher's going to start at right tackle. Don't worry about it. Just get healthy." And then say, this is a pretty obvious contingency plan. If and when Blake Fisher struggles, some point during the season, we can just say, all right, we're turning it over to Simmons now. It's go time.
I like it. You got the Rams up on the clock. That top guy, Starks, I think is going to be interesting for these next couple picks here. I know I'm looking at him. Are you looking at him for the Rams?
Yeah, I think he's definitely in play. I don't think they necessarily need to chase that, but I think it would make a ton of sense. They've got kind of some interesting players in that back end. They've got the Cameron Curl and Cameron Kitchens. Kitchens, I think, has talent. I like that guy in the draft. He was very inconsistent, and then he was coming into the draft off an awful season where it was like Murphy's Law, but in safety form. If you just every single big bad play, he was somehow at the root of it, and it was so extreme that it was I'm just going to assume that can't happen as a baseline. Nobody is so bad that everything they do just turns to crap in the secondary. But that was the season he was coming off. And it's I think the chances are he's a better player than that. And the good, when you went looking for the sort of good on his tape previous years or whatever, the good was really good. So if you just kind of put it down to the season equivalent of a bad day at the office, right, where everything just goes wrong, I think the potential was there for him to be pretty good. He made some plays as a rookie. So, yeah, I think Starks could definitely come in there and at least compete to start and maybe take over one of those spots at some point. I also think cornerback is kind of a need for them. So maybe this is where, those forgotten corners that all seem to be sliding at this point. Siobhan Ravel, Hairston's on the rise, though apparently there's an off-field issue with him as well. Whether it's one of these guys that ends up being interested or of interest at that spot. Corner, I think, is definitely a need for this team. Outside of that, they don't have that many, glaring spots.
Yeah, I mean, they just added 4 defensive linemen last year, Kobe Turner the previous year, so they got younger on the D line. I think linebacker is always a question, but they opt in to UDFAs and 7th rounder Omar Spates and everything. They opt into those late round linebackers, even Ernest Jones as a mid-round starter as a rookie. So they haven't invested in that position heavily outside of a 1-year Bobby Wagner deal. So yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of just glaring gotta have it type of needs.
So I think I might grab Starks just as value at this point. He's the top player in the PFF board. He's the top player in the consensus board available. I don't know if it's certain that he's going to come in and start day one, but just in terms of value, I think this is the spot.
Are we going to do the James Pierce to the smart organizations deal again? The Ravens have a chance to get Pierce here. The Eagles could have a chance to get Pierce a little bit later on. I saw the chat suggesting maybe Tyler Booker to the Ravens. I do kind of like that as a fit coming off the not so great combine, but Baltimore is more of a, phone booth type of offense as far as the, run blocking goes. So I think Booker could handle that pretty well. So interesting spots here or options here for Baltimore. But I would,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm considering Pierce though.
I mean, the Pierce thing is interesting. If it is character concerns, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, number one, the lower down you get, the the more it's palatable, the more the trade-off is fair. Number two, generally speaking, these teams lower down, they already have players like that. Like they're not relying on that guy to come in and be like the guy right away, the way teams higher up in the draft would be. So it matters less to an extent, if they bust or if they don't pan out the way they want to. So I think there's a reason why that sort of tends to be a trend. It's not because those teams necessarily covet guys with question marks. It's because they can absorb those things more than other teams can.
We have breaking news we have to get to in just a minute here. The one other play I wanted to mention here for the Ravens, though, intern Anthony does bring up the point with DK Metcalf in the division, the Bengals receivers, Jerry Jeudy in the Browns. Ravens could go corner again, back-to-back years at corner. I'm just going to say I'm loving the corners in this range, really loving the corners in this range, say 25 through 45. And I think Baltimore, much like last year, man, I think Baltimore got a steal in Nate Wiggins. I think obviously the Eagles got a steal in Cooper DeJean. So I think the cornerback value in this range of the draft is going to be extremely high. So all that said, I think I might go with Anthony's suggestion here. The next best corner on the market. I love Chavon Ravel. I'm going to trust. I need to trust the medical on Ravel here, coming out of East Carolina. But I'm going that he's got the length and everything, kind of a different, different type of player from Nate Wiggins. I'm going to go Chavon Ravel out of East Carolina. He's my pick here for Baltimore.
All right.
I was considering those other guys, but I'm going corner here. Got to keep up with the receivers in the division. The breaking news.
Oh yeah, sorry.
The breaking news is the Chargers are bringing back Khalil Mack on a 1-year deal, fully guaranteed $18 million. So we've got pretty good deal here for the Chargers. Mack's he's not Myles Garrett. He's getting older. He's at that age where you never know when things are going to fall apart. But 18 million when we're talking about the best edge rushers making 30 plus and Myles Garrett making 40 now, it's a pretty nice 1-year deal for the Chargers.
Yeah, kind of a weird deal for him to take, I guess. Like a 1 year, 18 million. I mean, it's like a bad franchise tag.
I'm surprised. I am surprised because I could see, Buffalo just released Von Miller, which made sense, right? I could see Buffalo throwing, I don't know, 2 years, 25, 20 to 24 at him, whatever it might be, right? Throwing a decent chunk of change at him for a 2-year deal to go try to win a Super Bowl. So I could see the market being pretty strong for Khalil Mack, given the way some of the other dominoes have fallen.
Yeah,
Harold Landry just made
surprised.
a ton of money from the Patriots. So
right, I would be surprised if he couldn't have done better than that in an hour's time. So I mean, he must want to go back there.
Yeah, so good deal for the Chargers. So we thought that the Chargers might have 2 new edges. They've got Tuli Tuiapoloto there, but we thought it might be Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack both moving on. It looks like they'll have Mack back and just having to replace Joey Bosa in that rotation.
All right. The Detroit Lions on the clock, pick number 28. The Lions, I think a lot of people are trying to find them an edge rusher. James Pierce would be interesting here. Donovan Ezeraku would be interesting here from Boston College. The interior is in good shape with starters, but Derek Harmon in terms of rotational values would certainly be intriguing for them. Generally, like corner, I think is still a need maybe, or just definitely an area they could focus on. Like this is a case where like the Bengals did or the Eagles have done, and which shows you the different ways this can go. The Lions kind of future-proof that spot, right? Because the 2 corners that are currently in line to start for them, and with Amik Robertson presumably moving back to the slot, it's the guys they drafted last year. It's Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. So you're like, well, perfect. They kind of predicted this. They went out and got ahead of it. Neither one of those guys, showed last year that they could absolutely lock that down and be high-end starters. They're rookies. It's a tough position to come in and be good at right away. But do you look at that and say, we can rely on those 2 guys because we liked them a year ago, we saw what we need, we're good? Or do you say, right now we have 2 unproven commodities starting at corner, it would make sense to try and build in some contingency and go looking for, another option at corner, which may or may not happen in free agency, in an hour's time. But that cornerback spot definitely has a potential weakness in it right now. I mean, offensive line depth, they still should have a really good offensive line, but a couple of those guys are not getting any younger and have dealt with some injuries. So I think they could be in the offensive line market, but it's a pretty good team without too many glaring weaknesses.
Yeah, I don't see the Lions go back to corner with their first two picks being drafted, being cornerbacks last year. I just don't see them doing that from a resource allocation standpoint. I get your point. Like, they're kind of unproven, but I think they put Terrion Arnold in a tough spot last year. They were playing a ton of man coverage. I think he's better than whatever his production numbers showed and some of the penalties. So I think they'll be okay at corner and won't double down there. But yeah, they're in this position where you've got to keep adding depth at valuable positions. I think that's the key for Detroit. Defensive line, man.
Yeah.
D-line,
I think I'm going to grab Izaraku from Boston College.
Is that who I took for them last week? Probably. I love that fit. I think that's a fantastic fit. They brought Marcus Davenport back on the 1-year deal, which keeps getting less and less, right? It was like 11 or 12 million for Minnesota a couple years ago. It was down to 6 last year for Detroit. Now it's down to like 4. So bring Marcus Davenport back and hope that he could play more than 500 snaps at some point in his career.
Any year now, he'll play, at least a couple of games.
Washington Commanders are up at pick number 29 here. So you took Ezaraku. Let me just add that on mine. Commanders, look, for a team that made it to the Final Four, could use offensive line help, absolutely need help on the edge, on the defensive line, secondary help. They need help everywhere, right? So that they're not like completely rebuilding, because again, they finished in the Final Four. They had a great season, but the roster should have been in the middle of a rebuild. So they could go a whole bunch of different ways here. I think the Commanders, I'm intrigued by the James Pierce thing, right? This is one of those, we're guessing on the off field. It fits a major need. He fell in the draft because we're kind of like in this halfway house, and let's just say Washington's going to make the play here to get Pierce. And maybe Adam Peters is that next guy where you're like, ah, man, you let Adam Peters do it again. You let him pick up Deebo Samuel for a 5. You're letting him take James Pierce at pick 29 when Pierce was talked about going in the top 10. But I think it fits a need. You get that juice off the edge and just continue to build, on both lines for Washington. So I like Pierce at 29 for the Commanders.
I like it. So Buffalo on the clock, pick number 30. Still need a wide receiver, an ex-wide receiver that can play on the outside. This was where a week ago we did our first to market, Jaden Higgins, a wide receiver from Iowa State, in the first round. I still really like that fit.
Yeah, it's good.
I like Rogers, that. I mean, right now he's on that board, he's like 20 spots, 25 spots lower than Matthew Golden. And I think it's a much better pick for them than Golden would be.
Consensus board moves slower. It definitely moves slower than people's individual boards, of course, because individual boards, you just jump them up 20 spots or whatever, and that doesn't put a dent in the consensus. Higgins is up to 64. That's his highest he's ever been. 64 on the consensus board right now.
Look at this. 44.5% have Buffalo picking an interior defensive lineman, a defensive tackle at this spot.
So I'm guessing a lot of that was Kenneth Grant before he moved up boards. That was an early common pick. I do love the Darius Alexander fit here for them, or Derek Harmon. I think either of those guys as pass rushers, though neither one is that like strong hold the point. I mean, Alexander can hold the point a little bit. I don't think Harmon really can that well with his height. So I want more of that, I think, in Buffalo to pair with Ed Oliver. But the idea of like two really good interior pass rushers is intriguing.
Yeah, and that's where those guys are right now. It's Derek Harmon, Darius Alexander. The consensus board has Tyreek Williams from Ohio State next. Trevor and PFF's board has TJ Sanders from South Carolina. I don't think either of those guys is really in play at this point. To me, it's like, do I take one of the defensive tackles, which most people have Buffalo taken, or do we stick to our guns first to market and grab?
Stick with the agenda. The Jaden Higgins agenda.
The Jaden Higgins agenda is going to continue, I think.
I like it.
Look at this. I mean, we're getting better every year. We've got elite grades. We've got elite yards per route run. We've got elite contested catch rate. We're elite against man coverage. We are 6'4", 215 pounds, who ran fast. This is, let's stick with the
Jaden
agenda.
Higgins. The agenda continues. Jaden Higgins.
And Iowa State. Jaden Higgins.
For the rest of eternity, he's got to be the one. So I just have to see if this is.
That puts up Kansas City at 31.
The breaking news, not even breaking news, Buck Reesing, A to Z Sports. Just because it's interesting. 2 names I've heard around the Titans' interest: Zach Wilson and Mac Jones.
Huh.
I am all in on this. I need more Zach Wilson data points. I need more Zach Wilson data points. We have all these former Jets. All the former Jets are having success. All the former Darnold and Geno and Rodgers is probably going to go to Minnesota and win 13 games this year. That's how it goes, right? Follow Brett Favre. I need more Zach Wilson data points. Quarterback Zach Wilson.
I'm always intrigued by, either or lists that where the players aren't this are very dissimilar, right? It's like they're zeroing in on these 2 targets that are wildly different players. It's like that doesn't scream focus to me. Like that doesn't scream we have a very clear idea of what we're looking for, and it's this type of player, and then we're just deciding, right? Is it player A or is it player B? It's like we've just decided there's 2 young quarterbacks potentially available, neither of whom are anything like the other one, and we'll just flip a coin and grab one of these busts and hope one of them works out.
I disagree about it's the quarterback position. It doesn't matter what they are stylistically. It just matters if you can get the most out of who they are, right? So if you bring in Mac Jones, you build your offense around Mac Jones. If you bring in Zach Wilson, you build your offense around him. Theoretically, as a bridge quarterback. I don't think it matters if they're like a running quarterback or this guy stays in the pocket or this guy's a good arm versus a bad arm. That doesn't matter at quarterback. Style.
I mean, I think it matters when you're like neither one of these guys is likely to be the guy. So let's take somebody that's like have a thing that actually makes sense with everybody else in the offense.
The similarity is like Mac Jones has 10 good games of tape. They just happen to be the first 10. And Zach Wilson has 4 good games of tape that were scattered throughout his 3 years with the Jets. The similarities is they have good tape in there that you probably watched and said, oh, we'll extract that out of him across the season, even though they do it differently. So anyway, we got 2 more picks here. Chiefs are at 31. Everybody likes to give the Chiefs a tackle here, right? Do I have to give them a tackle?
Well, they just moved on from Joe Thuney, obviously.
So they just moved on from Joe Thuney, so they could go guard. Obviously, they could. But left tackle's the bigger need. They were rumored to be going after Ronnie Stanley in free agency. He's back with the Ravens. The next few tackles that were supposed to get money this offseason, Dan Moore and Cam Robinson. And there's a growing like Jalen Moore, Niners backup who filled in admirably for Trent Williams. There's a growing second-tier market for Jalen Moore. I'm going to assume they make one of those plays. Is that a fair assumption? Like, I don't know that they really want to go back to we'll just draft a left tackle and he'll protect Mahomes' blind side. I don't know if they're going to play that game.
Yeah, I think that's the problem with picking at the bottom of the first round, right? Is that every player here, generally, year on year, is a developmental left tackle. They're not, the guys that you thought could come in and start day one and be good are always gone in the first 10 draft picks. So if this is where you are, and they've been here for a few years, like every year, it's the Chiefs will draft the developmental left tackle in the bottom of the first round because that's what's there. And generally they either have or they haven't, but they've gotten these guys in the first few rounds. None of them have worked out yet. And Kingsley Suamataia might be their solution at left guard after, a year where he's barely played. But that's the risk. Like, that's why I agree. I think the chances are they're going to be more inclined to go and try and find a veteran of some description than to just swing on another developmental tackle and hope he's the guy this time.
They brought Nick Bolton back this weekend to play linebacker. So they've got some needs. They brought Marquise Brown back to play wide receiver. There was an off-field incident with Xavier Worthy, but I guess no charges filed against him or anything. So I don't think receiver is a massive need with the youth that they have there, plus Marquise Brown coming back. So the biggest need's left tackle and guard, but they have potential options there, and I think they're going to play that free agency game. I'm a little interested in the corners again because of the future of that position with Jalen Watson. Trent McDuffie's about to get paid as well with Jaycee Horn contract going crazy. Like McDuffie's going to get paid. Jalen Watson heading into the last year of his rookie contract, and their need for probably depth there. So I wonder if they want a future-proof corner as far as the value at this spot. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an area they could address. McDuffie's fantastic, but any of the next couple of guys could absolutely be upgraded upon. If they think the value's there, I think it's definitely a reasonable spot.
I might go crazy here. I might go Azariah Thomas from Florida State. Size, press man coverage ability. He's very young. It's a move for the future for the Kansas City Chiefs. And just to mix it up for Chiefs fans who just get tackles all the time. Like I could easily pick Josh Connolly for the 900th time, but we're mixing it up. Give me Thomas. Give me Thomas from Florida State.
Drafts that mix it up.
People love that. There's never any criticism.
They love it.
Never criticism. So,
all right.
Looking forward
to number 32, the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champion on the clock.
Some good players.
So who's the top player? Top player on Trevor/PFF's board is Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State. Who's the best player available from the consensus board?
I think it's Tyler Booker at 24.
Yeah, looks like it.
And they have a right guard need.
Booker at 24, Golden at 26, the receiver from Texas with the 4.29 that may or may not be fake.
We didn't take Golden yet? I forgot about Golden.
No, I don't think so.
Should have given him to Kansas City.
No, there he is. Derek Harmon, 30.
And Marion Hampton and Josh Connolly.
Yeah.
I always thought Scarleton could be in play there too. On the edge, he's at 34 on the board.
Yeah, I mean, so none of these guys, I think, would fall into the category of how do we let Harry do this, or how do we let Howie do this again? You know?
No, but this is the point in the draft where you're getting some pretty good football players still. You have some options.
But there's no one they're not halting the slide of some like consensus top 10 player that slid all the way down to 32. And we're like, man, Howie just cheated the draft again.
Because I took Pierce with their division rival, Washington.
Yeah.
It almost
Golden would be interesting here. You've got AJ Brown, big contested catch, speed receiver on the outside. You've got the finesse, sideline ability, route running chops of Devontae Smith, and then Golden, who could come in and be true downfield speed threat. That would be pretty interesting, actually.
If he's fast. I mean, he's a really good route runner. And again, the point on Golden is like you're writing in your notes, like this dude knows how to get open, sets up defenders, gets in and out of his breaks, very smooth. And then, oh, by the way, he ran a 4.29. I mean, that's the positive for Golden. Like the speed wasn't even part of the evaluation that had him as a fringe first rounder.
Right.
And then he ran fast.
Offensive line, you're either looking for a starting right guard or you're future-proofing at some point. Presumably Lane Johnson is going to retire, even though he continues to truck on looking like the best right tackle in the NFL year on year. So, you could future-proof that spot. I would be obviously Josh Connolly from Oregon is a name here. The other name who slid way down this board for some reason is Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, the guard/tackle. Jackson could come in, start at right guard right away. And I don't know, maybe you can project him out to right tackle if and when Lane Johnson retires in the future and or gets hurt at any point. I think Donovan Jackson would be an interesting pick for them here.
You're going to go way off the board here too. He's 37 on the consensus board. It's not that wild.
Way off Trevor's board, not so much way off the consensus board.
Trevor doesn't appreciate Jackson's grit that he battled through at the combine.
Right.
Just doesn't appreciate that.
I think I might grab Donovan Jackson here.
And the PFF grades they're fine, they're solid, but they're not capturing a guard playing tackle, playing out of position the way he did, and there's something to that. There's something to that versatility that he showed down the stretch for Ohio State. So there it is.
Download our image right now.
Donovan Jackson. And then, as always, Sam, Tyler Booker's available. Golden's still available. Ibuka, Derek Harmon. There's some good players on the turn. Like that number 33 pick. A lot of calls for pick 33 heading into day 2. I love day 1 to day 2. I love the buzz around day 1 to day 2, reacting to the first round and seeing all those good players still available heading into day 2. I love it.
Always the most popular pick of the draft.
So there it is, man. We've got another mock draft in the books. I like when we go back and forth, talk through it. It's all just a big thought exercise. That's all it is. It's about the discussion. It's about the stories that we tell along the way. So free agency starts today. Within the next hour, we're going to get more news. You need to stick with this channel, hit the thumbs up, but most importantly, hit the subscribe button here. So you're sticking with Check the Mic YouTube channel. We're going to go live whenever the big news breaks. When the big news breaks, we're going live. I did not say here 2,250 times. When do I say it? Pick here or stay right here? Stay right here. Stay with us. Stay with us on Check the Mic. I'll mix it up.
It's a lot of here's.
I guess so. 250. Appreciate the people counting. Anything else before we wrap this thing up?
No. Obviously, that's exactly how the mock exactly how the first round will unfold in a month's time, month and a half.
Leave us your feedback. I mean, if you hate the mock, of course you're going to tell us. But if you loved the mock, if this was the best mock ever, you let us know in the chat. Right here, right below here.
Let's see if we can get a single positive comment out of the comments.
Yeah, we're just looking for a couple positives here. That's all. There'd be a record. Positive comments. Mock Draft Monday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We know that free agency will change everything within the hour. Hit the thumbs up. Hit the subscribe on the way out. Check the mic. We'll see you again on Wednesday, 10:30 a.m.